Take one slow breath with me. I'm Joe, and you've done enough for today. From here on, you don't have to chase sleep anymore. Just listen. Let the rain fill the quiet spaces. Let these true crime stories gently occupy your thoughts, and let the night do the rest. There are only a few ads in the first 10 minutes, then nothing to interrupt your rest for hours. If this little escape helps you unwind, I'd love it if you subscribed and left a like. Tell me where you're resting tonight. Now, let's begin. Case 1. It was the 31st of May, 2007, a Thursday. Alan Beagley was worried about his 32-year-old daughter, Kate Beagley. He had seen her the night before, the 30th of May, at around 6:30 p.m. She had seemed excited when he left her, as she was looking forward to a night out. But the next day he had not heard from her, and when he discovered she had missed appointments and was not at work at all, he was deeply concerned. Kate lived alone in her apartment at Walton-on-Thames, Surrey, United Kingdom. She was a very driven young woman, and after graduating with a degree in sports administration, she had worked her way up through the ranks at British Gas, where she had worked for 10 years. She was always in constant touch with friends and family. So even though it had been less than 24 hours since she was last seen, Alan reported her missing to police because he knew his daughter and believed something must have happened to her. Kate's friends told police that on the night of the 30th of May, Kate had agreed to go on a first date with a man she had met a couple of weeks earlier. That man was 27-year-old fitness trainer Carl Taylor. Kate had met Carl at a club when she was out with friends in central London on the 18th of May. He approached her and was chatty and flirtatious, so Kate agreed to give him her number. They sent various text messages to each other in the days that followed and arranged to meet up for a date on the 30th of May. Kate told her friends about it. They had arranged to meet for a drink at the Roebuck Bar, which overlooked the Thames. Kate met Carl as planned that night, and during their date she sent several of her friends text messages. But that was the last time anyone heard anything from her. Police spoke to Carl. He initially said he did not know where Kate was or what had happened to her before claiming that Kate had dropped him off in Twickenham after their date. After that, he gave police different accounts of what had taken place that night and answered no comment to some questions. He was arrested on suspicion of kidnap. Following further questioning, Carl ended any hope of Kate being found alive. She was not missing. She was dead. Carl told police that he had stabbed Kate to death as they sat on a bench on Richmond Hill. He confessed to driving her body to a nature reserve in Hertfordshire and leaving it partially hidden near a car park. Carl then led police to where he had dumped Kate's body, and they found her in Nettles in Oxay Woods in Hertfordshire. Carl was charged with murder, and despite the admissions he had made to police, entered a plea of not guilty. It was the prosecution's case that Carl had gone on the date with Kate with the intention of murdering her so that he could steal her car. The court heard that on the night of the 30th of May, their date started off as planned. They drove to a beauty spot on Richmond Hill, overlooking the Thames, and bought a drink at the Roebuck Bar. They were there for a while and afterwards went outside and sat on a bench. The area is known for its beautiful views, and it is not uncommon for people to sit on the bench and admire them. The court heard that when they were inside the Roebuck Bar, Kate did not appear to be interested in Carl. A woman, Maureen Roncone, was inside the bar that evening and told police that Kate did not talk much. That as soon as they sat down, Kate had her head down texting on her mobile phone, that there was no conversation other than Carl talking to her, and that she was still texting when they left. It was the prosecution's case that, as soon as they were outside and away from the bar, where there were no witnesses, Carl viciously stabbed Kate to death in a frenzied attack. The court heard that Carl had taken a pair of scissors and a carving knife with him, items he had taken from a friend's house, and had hidden the knife up his sleeve while he was with Kate on the date. The entire time he was with Kate at the bar, the carving knife was hidden up his sleeve. The prosecutor, Peter Clark, QC, told the court that Carl had given police different accounts of what happened that night, but that in one of the accounts, Carl said he had stabbed Kate during an argument, telling her that all he wanted was her car. He told police that she pushed him away and grabbed him, and that he stabbed her in the throat, continuing to cut her in the neck because she was going for his face. The court heard that there were 31 stab wounds to Kate's face and neck. The court also heard that after Kate was stabbed to death, Carl put her body in the boot of her own car and drove through London. As he drove, he spoke to his girlfriend, Lauren Chan Locke, on the phone. Lauren did not know where he had been or what had just happened. The jury were shown CCTV footage of Carl driving Kate's car into a garage at 12:20 a.m. on the 31st of May and filling it up with petrol. He can be seen on the footage talking with other drivers on the forecourt. In both his conversation with Lauren and his interaction at the garage, Carl appeared calm and nonchalant. Carl drove to Oxay Woods and removed Kate's clothes. He then washed her body using bottles of mineral water he found in Kate's car to try to remove any trace of DNA. Carl dumped Kate's body in nettles in the woods. When Carl got home, he showed off Kate's car to friends and family and sold Kate's mobile phone to a friend. He gave friends Marks and Spencer gift vouchers that he found in the glove box inside Kate's car. The court heard that police found Kate's car and recovered the knife that had been used as a murder weapon. They also found Kate's clothing and personal property. It was the defense's case, despite the different accounts Carl had given police, that he was not responsible for Kate's death. The court heard that Carl had once again changed his account of what happened on the night of the 30th of May. It was the defense's case that Kate had unalived herself due to a dark and cold side. Carl testified and told the court that Kate had unalived herself by prodding her head forward onto his knife. He told the court that just before that, she had said she was having problems. The court heard that Carl had brought the knife with him that night because he himself felt like unaliving himself. He told the court that when the knife fell out of his sleeve, Kate picked it up and began prodding herself in the neck. Carl was cross-examined by the prosecutor and was asked to describe and show the jury how Kate had stabbed herself 31 times. Carl claimed it was 14 times and refused to demonstrate, saying he would not go into the details of how he perceived her doing it. He declined to answer on the basis that he was not in the right emotional state to do so. But the judge told him that as a witness, he must answer. Judge Giles Forrester told Carl to show the jury how Kate had died, telling him that he was not there to dictate terms, but to demonstrate how she came to lose her life. The prosecutor rolled up a piece of paper to make a knife about 6 inches long. He again asked Carl to show the court how Kate had unalived herself. Carl gently prodded himself in the neck with the paper knife and told the court that he had realized she had passed away, that he had been crying profusely, and that he had lain on the grass and looked at the sky. The prosecution told the court that Carl's claim that Kate had been standing the entire time she was stabbing herself was nonsensical. The court heard that among the 31 injuries Kate received were blows that severed her carotid artery and her jugular vein, and that she would not have been in a position to remain standing. Carl was asked why, as a fitness instructor with martial arts training, he had not tried to help Kate. He told the court that it was an awkward situation. The jury took just 2 hours to find him guilty. They did not believe Carl's latest account of what had happened that night. Carl was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 30 years. In a further act of wickedness, it was reported, Carl wrote a letter to Kate's father, Alan. In it, he wrote that he was the man who had met Alan's daughter on the Friday night, and that, although he might have taken her life, her heart still beat in the good that people do, and her soul lived on in good memories. He went on to describe his impressions of Kate in flowery, sentimental language, questioning whose life he had really taken, and telling Alan to think of a star whenever he missed her. After Carl was sentenced to life in prison, Alan spoke of his family's shattering loss. He said that on Wednesday, the 30th of May, 2007, he had left his only daughter, Kate, looking forward to an evening out, that she had been brutally murdered by the man she went to meet, and that they never saw her again. He said their lives had been turned upside down since then. He described Kate as a loving, thoughtful daughter, sister, and friend, as devoted to them all as they were to her. Great fun to be with. Missed tremendously by everyone who knew her, with a gung-ho approach to life that she lived to the full. He said the family cherished and were grateful for all the memories of the wonderful time spent together, that the cruel and sudden loss of Kate had had an overwhelming impact on her family and friends, and that their lives would never be the same again. He said their family had been devastated and life seemed empty and meaningless without Kate, that the worst episode of their lives had reached a conclusion within the judicial system, but that they now had to piece together their lives around the void left by her loss, remembering the positive effect she had had on all of them. Case 2. It was the 6th of April, 2013, a Saturday. At 10:30 a.m. that morning, Ann Bruce drove to the home of 29-year-old Sharon Searmans, as she had not heard from Sharon and was worried. Sharon lived in a house on Doveton Street in Ballarat, Victoria, Australia, with her 4-year-old son, Aaron. Ann was Aaron's paternal grandmother. She spoke to Sharon almost daily and had spent the afternoon with her the previous day. They had had lunch and arranged to meet again on the 6th of April, but Ann had not heard from her, which was unusual. Ann knew that after they met the day before, Sharon had gone to her parents, John and Denise Searmans' house for dinner with Aaron, and that they had left there at 7:45 p.m. That was the last time anybody had heard from Sharon. Sharon worked from home. She had initially worked for a commercial cleaning company for a number of years, and that was where she met Aaron's father. They lived together for 3 years, but the relationship did not work out, and Sharon went on to complete a nail technician course and opened a studio at her home so that she could support her young son. She was a talented artist and close to her parents, to Ann, and to her 3 older brothers. She was loyal and responsible, which was why Ann knew something was wrong, as it was so out of character for her not to be in touch when they had arranged to meet. Ann drove to Sharon's house with her boyfriend. When they arrived, Ann's boyfriend waited in the car while Ann walked up to the back of the house and opened the back door. When she entered the kitchen, she saw Aaron. He was wearing his pajamas. Ann asked him where Sharon was. He pointed at the passageway and told her that his mummy was up there. It was at that point that Ann noticed there was blood on the floor and against the door. She asked Aaron where the blood was from, and he told her that a big man had come the night before and hit his mummy with a baseball bat, and that his mummy would not wake up to give him any breakfast. Ann went outside and asked her boyfriend to check on Sharon inside her bedroom. When he went in, he found her lying on the floor with a blanket covering her legs and hips. She was not breathing. She had been savagely beaten to death. Police traced Sharon's phone and got a break in the case just 2 days after her body was found. Officers investigating the murder arrested and questioned 30-year-old Jason John Dinsley on the 8th of April. As soon as they brought him to the station, he made full admissions, telling police that he was responsible for Sharon's death. Police discovered that Sharon had met Jason in January 2013 via the online dating website Plenty of Fish. They exchanged text messages between the 11th and the 19th of January and agreed to meet on the 19th of January at Ballarat train station. He lived close to Sharon and seemed friendly, even sending messages with hearts and flowers, so Sharon agreed to meet him for a date. When they met at the train station, Sharon invited Jason back to her house for a coffee. But once they got there, Sharon felt uncomfortable and asked her friend to text her to say there was an emergency so that she could ask Jason to leave. Sharon later told her family and friends that Jason had described himself as a grieving romantic on his dating profile, and that he had not been in a relationship since the death of his fiancée in a car crash 7 years earlier. But Sharon told her family that Jason was not like his profile at all, that he was filthy, wearing dirty clothes when she met him, and that she was embarrassed to be seen with him and felt sorry for him. That was why, instead of their planned lunch at a nearby restaurant, she offered to have coffee with him at her home. But that had all taken place on the 19th of January, and there had been no contact between them since. So police wanted to know why Jason was inside her house on the 6th of April, almost 3 months after their date. Jason told police that he could not sleep the night of the 5th of April and had had an anxiety attack, and that in the early hours of the 6th of April, he went for a walk. It was around 2 a.m., and he recognized Sharon's house when he walked past it on Dubton Street. He told police that he had started thinking about all the times he had been rejected in the past, and that it had all just bubbled up. He told police that he was angered that Sharon did not want to see him again, that seeing her house reminded him of that, and of the other times he had been rejected, and that in that moment he had just flipped and was fuming. Jason decided to walk home about 2.7 kilometers away to get a weapon so that he could attack Sharon. When he got home, he found a cricket bat and took it with him, walking back to Sharon's house and arriving just before 5 a.m. that morning. According to Jason, he forced his way inside. He removed the glass louver panels and gained access through Sharon's window. When he was inside, Sharon woke, having heard a noise, and when she saw Jason, she tried to protect herself, but he began to hit her with the cricket bat until she was on the ground. He continued to hit her, swinging the bat downwards from above his head using both hands. Sharon was screaming, and Jason put his hand over her mouth and told her to be quiet. Sharon managed to get to her feet. Jason forced her towards her bedroom. At that point, Aaron had woken up due to the screams, and Sharon asked if she could check on him. She did, and then Jason forced her into her own bedroom. Jason tried to S.A. Sharon. He held a pocket knife to her throat. He became enraged when he could not get an erection and beat her to death by striking her head repeatedly with the cricket bat. Jason left the house and took Sharon's iPhone with him. He disposed of the bat, his shoes, and the glass louver panels on his way home. A post-mortem was conducted, and it was determined that the cause of Sharon's death was multiple blunt head injuries. The report also noted that Sharon had an incised injury to the neck and multiple bruises over her left shoulder and her right and left limbs. It was determined that the force required to cause her head injuries was extreme, and that the head injuries would have been rapidly fatal. Police asked Jason how many times he had hit Sharon with the cricket bat, and he told them he was unable to say, adding that he did not stop. Jason was charged with murder, attempted SA, and aggravated burglary, and he pleaded guilty to all 3 charges. The court heard that Jason had sent multiple hateful text messages and death threats to Sharon after she rejected him, and that she had not told anyone about them. The court heard that on the 6th of April, when she was attacked inside her own home, Aaron heard his mother scream. Jason's lawyer told the court that Jason had become enraged that Sharon had rebuffed him, that he had wanted to injure her, and that he had wanted to punish her. He was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 32 years. At his sentencing hearing, the judge, Justice Elizabeth Hollingsworth, said that whatever feelings of disappointment or rejection Jason might have had at the time would have been perfectly understandable, but that his response had been to become angry. So angry that some 2.5 months later, having had no further contact with the woman, he decided to get a weapon and break into her house in the middle of the night, and that once inside, his anger and violence increased to the point where he totally lost control of himself and beat her to death. Judge Hollingsworth said it was a sustained, ferocious, and cowardly attack. And to add to the harrowing details, it emerged that it was not Jason's first conviction. Sharon's family discovered that when Jason brutally murdered Sharon, he was out on parole. He had more than 140 convictions, most of the offenses being crimes such as burglary and drug offenses. But his crimes had begun to escalate in 2002 when he was convicted of threatening serious injury and unlawful assault. Almost 4 years later, he was jailed over the violent S.A. of a woman at a St. Kilda hotel. On the 4th of July 2006, he was convicted of 2 counts of S.A., aggravated burglary, false imprisonment, intentionally causing injury, robbery, and obtaining financial advantage by deception. The convictions related to offenses that occurred on the 18th of July 2005. Jason had forced a woman into a room at the hotel at St. Kilda, S.A.'d her, and afterwards tried to strangle her as he demanded money before letting her go. In relation to those charges, he was sentenced to 9 years with a non-parole period of 6.5 years and was released from prison on parole after serving just over 7 years. He was on parole for that conviction when he tried to S.A. and then murdered Sharon. Case 3. It was the 23rd of April, 1996, a Tuesday. 19-year-old Stacy Stites was due to work the early shift at the H-E-B grocery store in Bastrop, Texas, United States. She had to leave home early every morning when working that shift, just before 3 a.m., as it was in the produce department. But it allowed her to earn an extra 50 cents an hour. She had been working extra shifts as she wanted to save as much as she could for her wedding, which was in 18 days' time. She was excited about it, and just a few days earlier, her family had held a bridal shower for her. Stacy was the youngest of 5 children, and they all made an extra effort to make the day special. Her sister, Crystal Heffley, said the wedding was all Stacy could talk about. Stacy was due to marry 24-year-old police officer Jimmy Fennell. They met in Smithville and moved into an upstairs apartment in Giddings, Texas, in the same building where Stacy's mother, Carol Stites, lived. Because of the close proximity of the 2 homes, Stacy saw Carol frequently, and she called in on her the evening of the 22nd of April to tell her she loved her before she went upstairs to her own home with Jimmy. Early the next morning, the 23rd of April, Carol received a call from one of Stacy's co-workers who told her that Stacy had not shown up for work that day. Carol called Jimmy, and he went downstairs to Carol's home straight away. Carol gave him the keys to her car and told him to go look for Stacy. A patrol officer found Stacy's and Jimmy's red truck at the Bastrop High School parking lot that morning. It was locked. There was a bag of clothing in the back of the truck and a broken piece of belt with the buckle attached outside the driver's door. Police asked Jimmy to meet them at the truck, and Jimmy unlocked it when he got there. Jimmy told police that there was a piece of plastic from a cup Stacy used inside the truck that was now broken. He also observed a tennis shoe on the passenger floorboard and an earring on the passenger side floorboard. Jimmy confirmed that the broken piece of belt outside the truck belonged to Stacy. There was no sign of Stacy, however, either inside the truck or in the area around it. Police checked the truck and found bodily fluids on the floorboard. They noted that the driver's seat was reclined with the seatbelt fastened, and they believed it looked as if someone had been pulled out of the seat while buckled in. Because of that, along with Stacy's personal items and the broken cup inside the truck, they suspected foul play and that a struggle of some sort had taken place. Later that same day, at 3:30 p.m., Stacy's body was found off a rural road outside Bastrop. She was wearing only a black bra, underwear, undone blue jeans, socks, and a single tennis shoe. Her HEB name tag was found in the crook of her knee. A white t-shirt, a piece of a brown woven belt without a buckle, and 2 beer cans were found nearby. Stacy had been SA'd and strangled. The DNA analyst in the case said the semen found in Stacy's body had been deposited at the same time as her killing. Police had to find the match. They asked Jimmy, friends, family, co-workers, and anyone who knew Stacy to provide a sample of their DNA. But none were a match, even though Jimmy's DNA was not a match to the semen found inside Stacy's body. Police looked into the possibility that he was involved, as they knew he had been with her the night before she was found dead. Jimmy agreed to take 2 polygraph tests and was asked if he had killed Stacy. He answered no, but the examiner determined his answer was deceptive in both tests. Jimmy told police and the examiner that he was emotional taking the tests and had pictured Stacy lying, dead in her casket. Police ruled him out as a suspect, as the DNA was not a match, and they could not establish how he could have dropped his truck off at Bastrop and then returned to Giddings, some 30 miles away, in the time frame. Police had no match to the DNA obtained from Stacy's body, and no concrete leads until almost a year after her murder. Almost a year after Stacy's murder, police looked at the possibility that a man named Rodney Reed might have been responsible for her death. The reason Rodney came to their attention was a separate case involving the assault of a young woman. Linda Schluter had been attacked and had her car stolen, and she identified Rodney Reed from a photo when police showed her a number of different photos of different men. Linda was close in age to Stacy, and police looked for Rodney's DNA on their system to see if he was connected to Stacy's case. His DNA was on their system from another allegation that had been made against him. It had been collected and stored for an earlier sex attack. Those charges were dropped. But they used the DNA on the system to test against the DNA found on Stacy's body. It was a match. When police spoke to Rodney, he told them he was aware of Stacy's name, but only through the news coverage of her case, and that he had never met her. Police did not believe him. He was charged with SA, kidnapping, and murder. He entered a not guilty plea. It was the prosecution's case that Stacy left home that morning. The morning of the 23rd of April at 3 a.m., as she was due at work that day at 3:30 a.m. The court heard that her normal route to the grocery store was on Highway 21 through Bastrop. Jimmy testified. He told the court that he had spent the evening of the 22nd of April with Stacy, and that they had watched television together. According to Jimmy, Stacy left for work at 3 a.m. on the morning of the 23rd of April, which was her usual time to leave. The prosecution believed that Stacy was killed shortly afterwards. It was their case that as Stacy drove to work, she was stopped by Rodney, who abducted her, SA'd her, strangled her, and then left her body at the side of the street, where she was found a number of hours later. The prosecution told the jury that he then drove the truck back to Bastrop, where it was later found by a patrol officer, and that he then walked home. The truck was abandoned just 0.6 miles from where he lived. The court heard that Rodney frequently walked the area late at night. The Department of Public Safety, DPS crime scene investigator Karen Blackley testified. She was part of a team, along with Wilson Young and Terry Sandifer, that processed Stacy's body, the truck, and the scene where Stacy was found. Karen testified that she believed the murder weapon was Stacy's belt, because it matched the pattern found on her neck. Karen testified that the two belt pieces, one found outside the truck and the other beside Stacy's body, matched and were torn, not cut. The court heard testimony from Karen in relation to the SA aspect of the case. The court heard that Stacy was found partially clothed and that her pants had been ripped open, so Karen presumed an SA had preceded the murder. Karen also told the court that Stacy's underwear was wet in the crotch and bunched around her hips. She observed scratches on Stacy's arms and abdomen, a cigarette burn on her arm, and what looked like fire ant bites on her wrists. The court heard details of the autopsy conducted by Dr. Robert Bayardo, the Travis County medical examiner. He determined that Stacy had died around 3 a.m. on the 23rd of April. He concluded that the belt was the murder weapon and that the cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation. He also presumed Stacy had been SA'd and concluded that she had anal injuries that occurred at or around the time of death. Because of that, he believed that no consensual sexual activity had taken place. It was the defense's case that, despite Rodney telling police he did not know Stacy and had never even met her, they had in fact known each other and were having an affair. The court heard that their relationship was purely a sexual one. When asked why Rodney had not told police he knew Stacy, his lawyer claimed that he was afraid, as he knew he was a black male having sex with a white girl in Bastrop. The defense had no evidence and no witnesses to call who could say or prove that Rodney and Stacy knew each other and were involved in a sexual relationship. The jury deliberated and found Rodney guilty. At the sentencing part of his trial, the prosecutors presented two separate cases to try to establish that Rodney was a dangerous man who deserved a severe penalty. One related to a woman called Vivian Harbottle Chapman. The jury heard that in October 1995, just 6 months before Stacy was murdered, Vivian, who was 39 years old at the time, was SA'd and DNA found on her matched Rodney's DNA. The second case the prosecution referred to was that of 12-year-old Angela Hammy. Angela was SA'd in September 1989, and the court heard that DNA obtained in relation to that crime was also a match to Rodney's DNA. The jury deliberated in relation to the sentencing phase and sentenced Rodney to death. Stacy's family and the state of Texas believe that Rodney is the man who killed Stacy, and that the jury made the correct decision. They do not believe that Rodney and Stacy knew each other. Her sister, Deborah Oliver, told 2020 that there had never been any evidence whatsoever of any type of relationship, that there were no notes, no letters, and no phone records. The Innocence Project, a non-profit legal organization that works to free wrongly convicted people, took over the handling of Rodney's case in 2012. At that point, he had exhausted almost all of his appeals and had a scheduled execution date. Texas officials granted Rodney an indefinite stay of execution so that claims that he was innocent could be examined. Despite nobody coming forward at the time of Rodney's trial to say they were aware of a relationship between him and Stacy, the Innocence Project has obtained a number of affidavits from people to assist with his new legal fight for freedom. One such affidavit relates to a woman called Alicia Slater, who worked with Stacy at the H-E-B grocery store. Alicia said Stacy had told her she was having an affair with Rodney. Police spoke to Alicia at the time of Stacy's murder, and Alicia did not mention Rodney or that Stacy was having an affair. Another affidavit relates to an insurance salesman who claimed he had tried to sell life insurance to Stacy, and that when she told him she did not need any as she was too young, Jimmy said that if she ever cheated on him, he would kill her and no one would ever know about it. The Innocence Project is trying to get a new trial for Rodney based on new evidence that was not presented at his original trial. While Jimmy was ruled out as a suspect in Stacy's murder shortly after her death, he came to the attention of police in an unrelated case involving a woman called Connie Lear. Connie accused Jimmy of S.A.ing her while she was in custody. In October 2007, police were called to an apartment complex after a neighbor complained that a couple were drunk and arguing. That couple was Connie and her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was arrested for public intoxication and taken to the police station. Jimmy told Connie to get into his patrol car and to sit in the front. According to Connie, Jimmy drove to a secluded park and told her to get out, then placed his utility belt and gun on the back of the car and S.A.'d her. Jimmy was charged with aggravated S.A. with a deadly weapon, aggravated kidnapping, improper sexual activity with a person in custody, and official oppression. He pleaded guilty to improper sexual activity with a person in custody and to kidnapping, and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Case 4. It was the 4th of January, 2007, a Thursday. 25-year-old Danita Smith was due at college that day. She lived on campus at the Campus Crossings apartments in Durham, North Carolina, United States. Danita had spent 6 years in college and was working towards her master's degree at North Carolina Central University. She was ambitious and had great plans for her future. She excelled in journalism and photography and had earned a fellowship with the New York Times. Her personal life seemed great, too. Just a couple of months earlier, her boyfriend, Jermaire Stroud, had proposed to her, and she had said yes. They met in college and dated for 6 years. After they graduated, Danita stayed in Durham to pursue further studies, and Jermaire moved to Greensboro to become a police officer. But while he was away, they maintained their relationship. That morning, the morning of the 4th of January, Corey Smith, a Campus Crossings resident who lived in the same block as Danita, left his apartment at 10 a.m. to head to work. He saw a number of personal belongings scattered down the staircase, and at the end of the staircase he saw a woman. He believed she had fallen down the stairs due to the position she was lying in. Corey observed that the woman was not breathing, so he called 911 and checked her ID so that he could tell the dispatcher who she was. The woman was Danita Smith. When police arrived at the scene, they confirmed that Danita was dead. She had suffered a gunshot wound to the head. While they were at the scene, they were informed of a call that had been made from the same campus after 8 a.m. that same morning. At 8:10 a.m., Michael Hedgepeth, the maintenance director for the Campus Crossings apartments in Durham, heard a shot fired. He saw a woman running from the back to the front of the 1100 building of the complex. He approached her to see how she was. She had her hands in front of her mouth and was shaking and crying. He asked her if she had heard the shot, and she said she had, telling him she was afraid of guns. Michael called 911, but even though police arrived at the scene, they did not file a report as they could not locate where the shot had come from, and the woman Michael had spoken to had already left. He described her as a tall black woman, around 5 feet 10 inches, with a ponytail, driving a burgundy SUV. The officers who responded to the 911 call in relation to Danita's body believed the two incidents must be connected. They informed Jermaire, and he spent the day with his family and with Danita's family. Police asked Jermaire where he had been that morning. He told them he had been asleep in bed as he had worked the previous night. When he discovered they were looking for a woman driving a burgundy SUV, he told police that he knew a woman who drove such a vehicle. That woman was single mother of 2 Shannon Crawley. Danita did not know who Shannon was and had never met her. Shannon knew who Danita and Jermaire were, though. Shannon worked as a 911 dispatcher in Greensboro, and it was through her job that she met Jermaire. When they met, Jermaire was in a relationship with Danita, but Shannon was not aware of that, and they began an affair. Jermaire admitted the affair to police, but said it had ended around a year before Danita was shot. Police asked Jermaire if there would be any reason why Shannon would want Danita dead, and he told them that Shannon would not leave him alone after he ended the relationship. That she had joined his church and moved into a house in his neighborhood. Police spoke to Shannon. She told them she had never met Danita and had maybe only seen her picture once or twice before, and had seen her at church once, 2 weeks prior to Danita's death. When asked if she owned a gun, Shannon told police she did not. She said she was at home the morning of the 4th of January, as her child was sick, and that she went into work later that day. Police tested Shannon's SUV and found gunshot residue on the steering wheel. Police were then approached by Shannon's co-worker, who told them he had sold Shannon a gun. Shannon was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. It was the prosecution's case that Shannon was obsessed with Jermaire and had stalked Danita in a jealous rage, because Danita had what she wanted, Jermaire. The court heard testimony from Michael Hedgepeth. He testified that he had seen a woman that morning, whom the prosecution said was Shannon, and that the route she was taking was unusual, as there was a more convenient exit to the parking lot. Dr. Cynthia Gardner, a forensic pathologist, testified on behalf of the prosecution. She testified that Danita had been killed by a distant-range gunshot wound to the head, and that during the autopsy she recovered a bullet from Danita's body. Agent Scott Jones, a forensic firearms analyst at the State Bureau of Investigation, testified that the bullet most likely came from a revolver and that its caliber was in the .38 family. There were 8 possible firearms that could have fired the shot, including a Taurus. The court heard that Shannon, despite initially claiming she had never owned a gun, did own one. The jury heard from her co-worker, Ronald Simpson, who told the court that he had sold Shannon a .38 Taurus Special revolver in October 2006. The court heard that when police asked Shannon if she owned a gun, she said no. But when she discovered she had been caught out in that lie, she said she had disposed of the gun shortly after receiving it, claiming she had thrown the gun in one dumpster and the ammunition in another. The court heard that Jermaire owned 2 weapons, a .40 caliber Sig Sauer and a .40 caliber Glock 23 model pistol. Agent Jones testified that a .40 caliber weapon is not designed to fire a .38 caliber bullet. The court heard testimony from Michael Gurdziel, a forensic chemist at the SBI, who confirmed that gun residue was found on the steering wheel of Shannon's SUV. The prosecution presented evidence in relation to cell phone records. The state called Ryan Harger, a custodian of records for Sprint/Nextel, a telecommunications company that transmitted electronically recorded cell phone records to the Durham Police Department during its investigation. The state had Ryan examine the computer records for Jermair's and Shannon's cell phones for the time period in which Danita was shot. The jury heard that the day before and the day Danita was shot, Shannon's cell phone was making calls from Durham near the Campus Crossings apartments. All of the calls from the same period from Jermair's cell phone were relayed through towers located around Greensboro. The prosecution presented evidence to the jury of an allegation Shannon had made against Jermair to show a vindictive pattern. It was an allegation of S.A. that the defense did not want the jury to hear about. After Danita's death, while Shannon was out on bond on the 20th of June 2008, she told police that Jermair had S.A.'d her. She said he had come to her house in Charlotte and S.A.'d her between 2:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. that morning. She told police that he cut her clothes off with a knife and held the knife to her throat. The court heard that Shannon told police that Jermair cut her thigh, penetrated her vagina with the knife, and ejaculated. She claimed she needed stitches, as she had been penetrated by the knife. Pamela Zinkan, a detective in the sexual assault unit of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, testified that based on the alleged time of the S.A. and Jermair's cell phone records, he would have had to travel from Charlotte to Greensboro for work at approximately 120 miles per hour without stopping for red lights to have committed the S.A. The court heard that an S.A. kit was carried out and that it was negative for semen. While there were lacerations to Shannon's neck and thigh, as well as abrasions to the outer labia, there were no injuries that required stitches and no injuries to the vaginal canal, and a nurse and a physician's assistant testified to that fact. The court heard that Shannon told Detective Zinkan on the 21st of June 2008 that police should look for the knife in Jermair's trash can at his house. A couple of days later, Jermair put trash in his trash can for the first time since the alleged S.A. and found a knife at the bottom. There was nothing else in the trash can. He called police and told them about it. The court heard testimony from Brandon Inscore, one of Jermair's neighbors. He testified that on the 19th of June 2008, he heard a thump and saw a vehicle drive away from Jermair's trash can. Another neighbor, Jessica Hopkins, said she saw somebody throw something into Jermair's trash can on the 19th of June 2008 and then drive away. The prosecution, before closing their case, played tapes for the jury. They had obtained audio tapes when they sought discovery from the defense. They were defense tapes, but the defense did not intend to use them at trial, and the prosecution wanted the jury to hear them. Shannon had claimed they were secret audio recordings between her and Jermair, and that Jermair confessed to the murder on them. The prosecution wanted the jury to hear the tapes to show how different the male voice on the tape was from Jermair's voice, arguing that the male on the tape was not Jermair. In one recording, a man acknowledged in a whisper that he had killed Danita, but could not go to prison for it. It was the prosecution's case that the man heard on the tapes was not Jermair. The reason they wanted the jury to hear the tapes was the same reason they wanted them to hear about the S.A. allegations Shannon had made. They argued that it showed a pattern of lies and vindictiveness against Jermair, all of which were attempts to frame him. It was the defense's case that Shannon was innocent and did not even know Danita. It was their case that Jermair had stalked Shannon and that he was the one who shot Danita. Shannon testified on her own behalf and told the court that she was afraid of Jermair. Shannon told the court that the day before Danita was shot, the 3rd of January, she returned home to find Jermier inside her bedroom. She said he indicated he had a weapon and told her to be quiet. Shannon told the court that he drove her to Durham and then back to Greensboro. She said the same thing happened the morning Danita was shot. He drove her SUV and left it for several minutes when they got to the campus. Shannon testified that she got out of the SUV because she heard noises. She told the court that she heard a brief argument followed by a gunshot, and that at that stage she was about 3 or 4 feet in the front of the vehicle. According to Shannon, Jermier shot Danita. According to Shannon's testimony, Jermier ran back to the SUV and got into the driver's seat. Shannon told the court that she tried to get into the passenger seat behind the driver, but the back seat was locked. So Jermier jumped into the back from the driver's seat, and she got into the driver's seat. Shannon said it was at that point that she saw Michael Hedgepeth. Shannon told the court that Michael did not see Jermier, as he was crouched in the back of the vehicle. She said she did as she was told by Jermier, as he had threatened to harm her children. The defense urged the jury to find Shannon not guilty, but the prosecution asked the jury to consider that if something sounded too good to be true, then it probably was. Shannon had an explanation for everything. She had given an account of why her phone pinged off towers near Danita's apartment, through her claim that Jermier forced her to drive to Durham in the SUV. She gave an explanation of why gunshot residue was on the steering wheel, describing Jermier initially jumping into the driver's seat after the shot was fired. She even gave an account of why Michael saw only her that morning and not Jermier. She also obtained a confession on tape. But the prosecution told the jury to look at the facts, not her story. And that is what they did. Jurors deliberated for about 7 hours over 2 days and did not believe Shannon's story. They found her guilty of first-degree murder. Shannon was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Shannon did not wish to address the court after the verdict, but Danita's mother, Sharon Smith, did, telling Shannon that she might someday forgive her, but did not right now, and that she hoped she would rot in hell. Danita's father, Calvin Smith, also spoke after the verdict, saying he was thankful to God for the guilty verdict because he was glad Danita had not been murdered twice, and that in his opinion, the evidence spoke for itself, and there could have been no other verdict but a guilty one. But while Danita's parents were clear that the verdict was correct, Shannon's parents were not convinced and believed their daughter's innocence. Her mother, Ann Crawley, said after the trial that it was now her daughter who was the perfect victim. The perfect victim for someone like Jermier Stroud, who she said had now been convicted of a murder that he committed. Her father, Keith Crawley, was in agreement, saying that if it was the last thing he ever did, he would prove that Jermier was the one who actually committed the crime. Shannon's parents believe that Jermier is the person responsible for Danita's deaths. The judge in the case did not question the verdict in relation to Shannon, but he did not believe Jermier was without blame either. And when sentencing Shannon, he said that Jermier Stroud had caused a perfect storm to happen and then walked away from it, which was unfortunate for everyone in the case. Case 5. It was the 3rd of November, 2018, a Saturday. 40-year-old Tamla Horsford had plans that night. She had been invited to a friend's house for an adult slumber party. Her friend, Jean Meyer, wanted to celebrate her 45th birthday with some friends, and instead of arranging a night out, she thought it would be fun to have some friends stay over at her house in Cumming, Georgia, Atlanta, United States, so that they could have food and drink and not have to worry about driving home. Tamla arrived at the party later than the others, around 8:30 p.m. She was late because she wanted to make sure the casserole she was preparing for her husband, Leander, and their 5 sons was ready before she left. Jean had invited a group of mothers around for her birthday, most of whom knew each other through the local youth football league. The party was supposed to be a group of 9 women only, but there were a total of 12 people there that night. 3 of them were men, but one of the men was there only briefly to drop off his wife. The other men who were there for the entire night were Jose Barrera, Jean's boyfriend, and Tom Smith, the husband of a woman at the party. The women drank, ate, sang, and watched the LSU-Alabama game. The 2 men, Jose and Tom, watched football in the basement. Video footage and photographs from the night appeared to show that Tamla was having a great time. She was dressed in a white onesie with paw prints on it. The next morning, the 4th of November, Jean's aunt, Madeline Lombardi, saw something in the backyard. Madeline had been at the party, but stayed only briefly before going to bed. She lived in the house and got up early the next morning. She saw something from the kitchen window. It was Tamla. She was lying face down in the backyard and was not moving. Madeline told John, and John called 911. John's boyfriend, Jose, also spoke to the dispatcher, describing that Tamla was lying in the yard on the patio downstairs, not moving and not breathing, and noting a small cut on her right wrist that he said he did not know was self-inflicted. Police arrived at Jean's house a few minutes after the 911 call was made. When police arrived, Tamla was pronounced dead at the scene. Police believed her death was accidental and initially told her husband that it appeared she had fallen over some garden hedging and that the edging matched the marks on Tamla's shins. Madeline had fallen over it herself in the past. An autopsy was carried out, and then a second one was conducted on behalf of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. When the extent of Tamla's injuries became apparent, police believed it was more likely she had fallen from the second-floor deck, as the injuries could not have come from a ground-level fall. At various points throughout the night of the 3rd of November, Tamla had gone out on the deck to have a cigarette. The autopsy revealed that Tamla had blunt force trauma to her head, neck, torso, and extremities, including a broken neck and dislocated wrist that were inconsistent with a slight fall, such as a fall over garden edging. There were abrasions on Tamla's face and 4 types of hemorrhages in the skull and brain, dislocation of the right wrist, and cuts on her arms and legs. Tamla suffered a laceration of the right ventricle of the heart. The lead investigator, Mike Christian, examined the position in which Tamla's body was found in the backyard and noted that most notably, when Tamla was turned over, she had come to rest face down, and her head had not been canted to one side or the other. Tamla's legs were extended behind her, with both feet pointing to the right, and her right arm was close to her body. Her left arm was found extended, bent at the elbow. Neither an SA kit nor fingernail clippings were collected during the autopsy. The toxicology report revealed that Tamla's blood alcohol content was .238, nearly 3 times the legal driving limit, and that Xanax was found in her system. Police closed the case on the 20th of February, 2019, on the basis that they believed Tamla's death was accidental. They based that on the blood alcohol content and Tamla's use of marijuana, the door alarm log, and an unlit cigarette and lighter found on the upper deck. A blood alcohol content at that level could lead to a loss of coordination, and they determined that the evidence indicated Tamla went out on the deck for a cigarette just before 2 a.m. and fell to her death accidentally. Tamla's family and friends were not satisfied and did not believe the investigation had been carried out thoroughly enough to say with certainty that Tamla's death was accidental. There were unanswered questions. It emerged that Jose, who was a pretrial services officer, had used his role to access records relating to Tamla's case. He was placed on administrative leave in December 2018 due to his conduct on the basis that he had accessed confidential files on a current investigation surrounding a death in which he was a witness. He was later fired. There were a number of troubling aspects that went unanswered when the case was closed. How did Tamla get so disoriented that she fell off the deck if she was fine just before? Were the marks on her arms defensive wounds? Those close to Tamla questioned how her blood alcohol content was so high. She had been drinking tequila that night, but photos and videos taken throughout the night showed a happy, smiling Tamla who did not appear to be drunk. That was corroborated by some of the guests who did not notice that Tamla was particularly drunk. She appeared to be very much in control of her own faculties. In fact, one woman at the party, Stacy Smith, told police that she did not understand at all when police said that Tamla had fallen from the deck. It did not make sense to her how it could have happened, as Tamla had been on the deck many times. It emerged that the women who spent the night at John's house went to bed at different times. John and Jose said they went to bed at 1:30 a.m. One woman at the party, Bridget Fuller, saw Tamla at 1:47 a.m. Bridget did not stay over that night. She was collected by her husband at 1:47 a.m. Bridget told police that when she left, Tamla was eating some gumbo and said she would have a cigarette and then go to bed. A few minutes later, the door alarm system registered that the back door was opened. It was closed again and then opened once more at 1:57 a.m. Jose told the dispatcher on the 911 call that security cameras were installed and pointed at the backyard, but police discovered that the cameras were not recording and the batteries were dead. As the case was seen as an accidental death from the beginning, the scene was not preserved correctly. Evidence that may have been at the scene was not tested or fingerprinted. Jose told police that he had found and moved the unlit cigarette and lighter from the deck before he saw Tamla's body, but they were not tested. No explanation was provided for why the door opened again at 1:57 a.m. and remained open for the rest of the night if Tamla fell from the deck. The position of her body was unusual. Did somebody pose her body that way to make it appear she had fallen? Due to public demand for the investigation to be reopened and the many questions that remained unanswered, an independent investigation has now been ordered. Case 6. It was the 19th of November, 1988, a Saturday, just a few days before Thanksgiving. 9-year-old Michaela Garrick was out with her friend, Katrina Rodriguez. They left home at 10 a.m. that morning and rode their scooters to the Rainbow Market in Hayward, California, United States, which was just 2 blocks away from where they lived. Just 23 minutes later, at 10:23 a.m., the Hayward Police Department received a report that a child had been abducted. That child was Michaela Garrick. Police discovered that the 2 girls, Michaela and Katrina, had ridden their scooters to a store at Rainbow Market and left the scooters outside just at the door. But when they left the store, they found that only one scooter was there. They saw the second scooter in the parking lot at the market beside a parked car. Michaela ran to the scooter to retrieve it, and as she bent down to pick it up, she was grabbed by a man who had been sitting inside the parked car. He picked her up with his right arm around her waist and put her into the front seat of his car. As the scene unfolded in front of Katrina and other witnesses, Michaela screamed for help. The man backed out of the parking lot and drove away at speed. Katrina ran into the store to seek assistance, and the store clerk called police. Miscommunication at the outset led to a description of the wrong man being released to the public. The store clerk told police that the man seen taking Michaela was hippie-like, in his 30s with a mustache, and drove a burgundy-colored car. She thought it was a different man in the parking lot who had taken Michaela. But in reality, Katrina and two other witnesses saw the man who took Michaela, and he was a white man in his early 20s, 6 feet tall and slender, with blue eyes and long, dirty blonde hair. He also had severe acne or pockmarks on his face. The man drove a large sedan, either cream or tannish gold in color. The front bumper was damaged, and it looked like the car may have been involved in an accident. Prints were taken from the handlebars and fork of the scooter and compared with those of possible suspects, but no matches were found. Michaela's abduction received widespread media coverage, but no trace of her was found. Despite all the coverage, thousands of tips, leads, and even possible suspects, nobody was charged in relation to Michaela's case. And it went cold. The evidence was looked at again 30 years later. All of the evidence on file, the leads, witnesses, and possible suspects, was re-examined. Hayward police got a break in the case when Fremont police contacted them and advised them to look at the possibility that a man called David Mish might be connected to Michaela's disappearance. Fremont police had recently investigated David Mish for a double homicide from 1986. David had been convicted in 1990 of the second-degree murder of 36-year-old Margaret Ball in her Hayward home and sentenced to 18 years to life in prison. She had been stabbed to death. He was subsequently charged while incarcerated in 2018 with the Fremont double homicide. The Fremont double murder related to the 1986 killings of 18-year-old Michelle Xavier and 20-year-old Jennifer Dewey. On the 2nd of February, 1986, Michelle and Jennifer, who had been best friends for years, went to a birthday dinner at a restaurant. When they left, they were last seen at a 7-Eleven by their boyfriends, having stopped there on the way home. Shortly after midnight, a motorcyclist found their naked bodies on the side of the secluded Mill Creek Road. They were covered in blood. They had been shot and stabbed. Michelle's car was found 6 miles away in the parking lot of a shopping center. Their purses and identification were never found. Police believed it was a random killing, and the case went cold for 30 years. Due to advances in DNA, David Mish was arrested and charged in relation to their deaths. The Fremont police who arrested and charged David in relation to the Fremont double murder notified the Hayward police, as they believed he may have been involved in Michaela's disappearance. Hayward police, looking into Michaela's case, re-examined the evidence and David's prints and DNA. The prints found on the handlebars of the scooter were determined to be a match to David's prints. The ability to compare prints had improved since 1988 due to software, technology, and science. 2 eyewitnesses identified David in a photo lineup as having been in a car in the parking lot just before the abduction. 32 years after Michaela was abducted, 59-year-old David Mish was charged with abduction and murder on the 21st of December 2020. He faced special circumstance charges, murder during the commission of a kidnapping, and with a prior murder conviction, which can carry a sentence of death or life in prison without the possibility of parole because of his conviction for the murder of Margaret Ball. David's lawyer, Ernie Castillo, said that David denied the allegations against him and would fight the charges. Detective Robert Purnell of the Hayward Police Department said he believed it was reasonable to conclude that having violently abducted a 9-year-old girl who had not been seen in 32 years and whose remains had never been found, David had murdered the victim, disposed of her remains, and successfully kept them hidden from authorities. After the charges were announced, Michaela's mother, Sharon Murch, released a statement. She had hoped that one day she would find Michaela alive, but now accepted that she was probably no longer alive. She said what she had not envisioned was her daughter as a dead child, and that it was only when she heard this news that this vision of reality appeared, and that she honestly had not figured out what to do with it. Sharon asked police for all the details of David's past and the violence he had inflicted on others, saying that if Michaela could experience it, she could hear it, and that the thoughts of her daughter's fear, pain, and grief were overwhelming. Michaela Gerecht was last seen wearing a white t-shirt with the word Metro across the front, and pictures of people on the midsection. She had on denim pants rolled above her knees and black shoes, and wore 3-inch pearl or white-colored earrings that resembled feathers. She has not been seen since the 19th of November, 1988. Michaela was taken at a time when parents feared for the safety of their children in the Bay Area. She was the second of 3 girls abducted from the area. 7-year-old Amber Swartz Garcia had been taken in Pinole months before Michaela's abduction, and 13-year-old ice skater Eileen Micheloff disappeared shortly after, while walking home from school in Dublin. Amber Swartz Garcia was kidnapped on the 3rd of June 1988 in Pinole, California. Amber was not normally allowed to play outside unless supervised by an adult, but that day, the 3rd of June, Amber's mother, Kim Swartz, allowed her to play outside in the front yard. Amber was playing jump rope. In the space of just a few minutes, Amber disappeared. Kim could not find her and realized she was missing. Kim ran up and down the street, knocking on doors and screaming Amber's name. Amber was the daughter of Bernie Swartz, a police officer, and Kim Swartz. Her father had been shot and killed 4 months before her birth. He was fatally shot in 1980 while attempting to arrest a murder suspect. The suspect, James Odell, was later arrested and sentenced to death. In 2009, police and the FBI announced that Amber's case was closed. They said that a convicted murderer, Curtis Dean Anderson, had confessed to Amber's murder in 2007. Curtis was already in prison in relation to different charges. He had been convicted of kidnapping and murdering Shiana Fairchild of Vallejo, California, in 2000. She was just 7 years old and had disappeared while walking to school. Her partial remains were later found in the Santa Cruz Mountains. He had also been convicted of kidnapping and essaying another girl, 8-year-old Mitzi Sanchez, who managed to escape. Just 1 month after Curtis confessed to Amber's murder, he died in prison, and police did not have an opportunity to question him further. Before his death, Curtis told the FBI that on the day Amber was kidnapped, he had been driving to his aunt's house in Arizona. He said he wanted company and stopped off in Pinole, as it was an area he knew well, and saw Amber in her front yard playing. Curtis opened the door of his car and dragged Amber inside. On the way to Arizona, he kept her sedated with root beer schnapps. Curtis told the FBI that he murdered Amber in a motel room in the Tucson area, put her body in the trunk of his car, and tried to cross the border into Mexico. He was refused entry by border agents, as he was intoxicated, so he disposed of Amber's body in the Arizona desert off Highway 10 near Benson instead. A search was carried out in the area, but no human remains were found. No evidence was found to corroborate the confession. Amber's mother, Kim, wanted the case reopened, as she needed something more concrete, some actual physical evidence, to have some sort of closure. Even though the FBI profiler who conducted the prison interview with Curtis was convinced he had told the truth. Police have since reopened the case, as new technology will allow them to better process age-old evidence. In the release announcing the case had been reopened, Pinole police said that no information or evidence had been received that would dispute the confession made by Curtis Dean Anderson, but that because Amber Swartz had not been located, the department was modifying the status of the Amber Swartz case from closed to open, effective immediately. The third girl who went missing from the Bay Area around the same time was 13-year-old Eileen Micheloff. Police in Eileen's case will also re-examine it following the charges brought in Michaela's case. Eileen went missing on the 30th of January, 1989, while walking home from Wells Middle School in Dublin, California. It was a Monday. She was dismissed early as part of a physical education contract, through which she satisfied the school's PE requirements by ice skating. Eileen was a keen ice skater. Her mother, Maddie Micheloff, wanted her to take the bus, but Eileen wanted to walk home that day, as it was sunny. Eileen left school at 2:30 p.m. that day and likely walked down Penn Drive and turned onto Amador Valley Boulevard. The exact route she took home is not known. Her parents said they later learned that teenagers would often follow Martin Canyon Creek back home because it was a shortcut. She was seen walking alone on Amador Valley Boulevard near Village Parkway that afternoon at around 3 p.m. That was the last known sighting of her. Eileen's key fob was later found near the entrance to John Mape Park, which was along the route she would normally take if walking home. It was less than half a mile from her home. Maddie expected a call from Eileen that afternoon, as Eileen normally rang her to let her know she was home from school. Eileen was a studious girl who had dreams of studying to become a pediatrician, so when the call did not come, Maddie was not overly worried, as Eileen, if not studying, would usually be at the ice rink. Maddie was at work that day, and after work she went to the ice rink around 4:30 p.m. or 5 p.m., where Eileen normally practiced. But Maddie immediately noticed Eileen was not there and was concerned. Eileen's coaches told Maddie that they had driven to the family home around 3:30 p.m. to pick Eileen up, but that she was not at home. Maddie called her husband, Mike Micheloff, at his office to see if he had dropped off her skates at the rink that day and whether he had seen Eileen. He had not. No one knew where Eileen was. Maddie reported her missing to the police. A bloodhound sniffed one of Eileen's shirts to search for a potential scent within the first few days of her disappearance, but nothing was found. Mike walked along the creek for hours, calling his daughter's name. He organized an office staffed by local volunteers who printed and mailed posters with Eileen's picture across the state and country. But to date, no trace of Eileen has been found. Case 7. It was the 19th of October, 1995, a Thursday. 23-year-old Tina Tournai Sandoval left her overnight nursing job at North Colorado Medical Center in Greeley, Colorado, United States, at 7 a.m. Her colleagues did not know it then, but that was to be her last shift. Tina had just graduated from the University of Northern Colorado and was elated to get a job at the North Colorado Medical Center. It was a job she had worked hard to get, and she was good at it. Tina was one of 9 children, so she had grown up looking after her siblings, and caring for others came naturally to her. Things were good for Tina professionally, but her personal life was going through some changes. Tina was married to John Sandoval. Tina met John at college when she was studying nursing, and he was taking classes to become a radiology technician. They married in 1992 in the Colorado Rocky Mountains. But after just 2 years of marriage, Tina filed for divorce. Tina was determined to move forward with her life and was hoping the divorce would soon be finalized. She moved into a new apartment and started dating again. That day, the 19th of October, Tina's sister, Susan Tournai, was worried about Tina, and that worry intensified as the day went on. Tina had told Susan that she had made plans to meet John at his home that day after her shift. She was anxious about how it would go, as she wanted John to sign some papers and settle an IRS debt so that the divorce could be finalized. John did not want a divorce, and he did not want Tina to date anyone else, and she was concerned, because of some things he had done in the past, about meeting him that day. Tina asked Susan to go with her to meet John, but as Susan had work that day, she could not. Susan asked Tina to call her straight away after she met John to let her know how it went. Susan waited for the call from Tina, but no call came. As Susan was still at work, she asked their mother, Mary Tournay, to check on Tina. Mary went to Tina's apartment and discovered she was not there. She went to John's home, where he lived with his aunt. His aunt told Mary he was not home. Mary was concerned for Tina's safety when she saw Tina's jacket in the kitchen. She reported her missing to the police that night. Police went to Tina's apartment, and everything appeared in order. It looked exactly how they thought it should. It looked like she had returned home after her shift to change and had left again. They found her nurse's uniform in the apartment, but they did not know where her car was, so they began to search the area for it. Police found Tina's car at 3 a.m. on the 20th of October, parked 4 blocks from John's home. A police dog traced the scent from the driver's seat of Tina's car to John's home. Police knew John Sandoval, as he had convictions for harassment and burglary, and they had spoken to him a number of times in the past. When police went to John's home, he jumped out of a bedroom window and tried to run from them. They had to hold him down and observed fresh scratches on his torso and neck. They arrested him on trespassing charges in relation to a different case, wanting to bring him to the station to question him about Tina. At that point, they did not know what to charge him with in relation to her disappearance, as it was very early in the investigation. John told police that he did not know where Tina was. They searched his house and car. During the search, they found a white 5-gallon bucket and a new shovel with mud on the spade. They also found Tina's credit cards. Police found a loaded 9mm handgun, rope, and a flashlight in his car. But John was not willing to talk or cooperate in any way with the investigation. Tina's family told police that Tina had been nervous about meeting John that day. She had filed for divorce after discovering some things about John that she did not like. Tina had told one of her colleagues that John had a condition known as voyeurism. She said that if he saw a pretty woman at the store, he would follow her home and might watch her for 2 or 3 days. John would also leave their home in the middle of the night to look at women by peering through their windows. At times, he entered their homes and hid somewhere they could not see him, such as a cupboard, so that he could get a closer look. On occasion, he stole their underwear and brought it home. When police called at their house in the summer of 1995 to question John about another incident involving a woman who believed someone was stalking her, Tina had had enough and made the decision to file for divorce. When Tina's colleague asked her if John ever watched her, Tina admitted that he did, and that she would see his car parked outside her new apartment for hours at a time. Tina told her family about her concerns about John, too, telling them that when she told John she was filing for divorce, he threatened to unalive himself, putting a pistol to his head. Tina had also confided in her doctor that she was worried John would harm her. Despite that and other circumstantial evidence, the district attorney at the time believed they needed more evidence to arrest and charge John. They did not know where Tina was, they did not know what had happened to her, and there were no witnesses. Police searched a number of locations looking for Tina, including a reservoir and woodland. As John worked at a cemetery and knew the cemetery's procedures for burial, police also searched several graves in the area. They were dug up to see if Tina's remains were there. Some remains were examined to see if they were Tina's, but it was confirmed that they were not. The case went cold. In 2002, the state of Colorado issued a death certificate for Tina, after a judge found in December 2001 that there was enough evidence to believe she was dead. Despite the investigation slowing down, police still believed John was involved. He had been a suspect from the first day Tina was reported missing, and that had not changed. But a belief is not enough to convict. Charges were never filed, mainly because Tina's body was never found. That changed in June 2009, when a newly appointed district attorney asked for the case to be looked at again. Ken Buck looked at the evidence on file, and even though no new evidence had emerged, he decided to file first-degree murder charges against John. He believed the circumstantial evidence in the case was compelling and enough to convict John, even though they still could not say with absolute certainty that Tina was dead, what had happened to her, or where her body was located. John was charged with first-degree murder. John pleaded not guilty. It was the prosecution's case that even though Tina had not been found, they believed she was dead. After she left work the morning of the 19th of October, all of her activity stopped. There was no activity on her credit cards, her bank account, her nursing license, earnings, or Social Security since October 1995. Tina did not own a passport. There was no evidence she had changed her name either, as that would have required a petition to the court. The court heard that Tina was a responsible and reliable young woman. She never missed a day of work and paid her bills regularly. She had just signed a lease for a new apartment. There was no indication that Tina wanted to leave and start again somewhere else. It was the prosecution's case that the only explanation for her absence was that she had been murdered, and that all of the evidence pointed to the involvement of her husband, John. It was the prosecution's case that even though there was no body and no physical evidence, there was a multitude of circumstantial evidence, and they set out with a case of 137 witnesses to take the stand. It was their case that John had killed Tina and disposed of her body. The court heard that John was a voyeur and followed women. The jury heard from some of the women. Wendy Faust testified on behalf of the prosecution. She told the court that she worked at the Greeley Tribune and that a man had followed her intensely from West Greeley to downtown in 1993. Wendy told the court about the incident, describing how she had looked through the windows of a car next to her to see what the person looked like, wondered if they knew her, felt flushed and unsettled, backed out thinking he was following her, and got his plate number as she passed his car, after which he backed out and continued following her. Wendy told the court that the man followed her to her next sales stop at Scott Realty just blocks away and parked behind her, at which point she knew he was following her and was crying. Wendy told the court that the incident frightened her. She left and drove to the Tribune and told her supervisor what had happened. The man she believed was following her was also there and walked into the building, and the supervisor confronted him. Wendy was so uncomfortable that she took down the license plate of the car the man was driving. Police traced the car to Mary Lou Sandoval, John's mother. Police spoke to John afterwards. He told them he had been at the Tribune that day for one reason only, to place an ad for a piano. When asked about Wendy, John told police that he had not followed anyone that day. The court also heard from Kim Eaton, a former Evans police officer who had investigated John in relation to a stalking allegation made in June 1995. When she spoke to John, he told her that he was a recovering voyeur. Kim testified that John seemed to be under a lot of pressure and that he told her his wife was seeing another man. It was the defense's case that John was not involved in Tina's disappearance, and they questioned whether Tina was even dead. They put forward an argument that she may have left town, suggesting it was more likely she was a runaway looking for a fresh start. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. John was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. John's conviction was short-lived. In March 2016, the Colorado Court of Appeals overturned his conviction due to procedural errors and ordered a new trial. His conviction was overturned based on 3 errors committed at trial. The court ruled that the introduction of prior acts of stalking other women, the testimony from a domestic violence expert correlating stalking with murder, and the district attorney directing jurors to remember that testimony in closing arguments violated John's right to a fair trial. Just before John was due to face a second trial, he agreed to a plea deal. One he had requested himself, in exchange for the ability to plead guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder. He would lead authorities to the location of Tina's body. He confirmed what Tina's family had long feared. She was dead. John led authorities to the Sunset Memorial Gardens Cemetery in Greeley and to the grave of World War II veteran Arthur Hurt. His grave had been one of 3 that had been dug and were still open on the day Tina disappeared. Police called Arthur's family to inform them of what they had been told. Within just 90 minutes, Arthur's son, Richard, went to the police station and signed a release to allow his father's grave to be exhumed. Police discovered that John had dug about 2 feet below Arthur's grave and buried Tina's body. Tina's remains were found, wrapped in a comforter, covered by a tarp, and sealed with duct tape, 21 inches below the bottom of Arthur's grave. Cemetery workers had unknowingly buried Arthur over Tina's remains after John had buried and hidden Tina's body there. As part of the plea deal, John was sentenced to 25 years in prison and 5 years on parole. His sentence was dated back to August 2010, when he was convicted of first-degree murder. At the hearing, John apologized and expressed his condolences to the family. The plea deal offer was something Tina's family struggled with. They knew it meant John could one day be a free man again. Bob Kuznick, the father-in-law of Tina's sister Susan, read a statement on behalf of the family. He said their horrible ordeal, which had begun on the 19th of October, 1995, with the disappearance of Tina, had taken its final turn. He said that what they now knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, was that Tina had been murdered by her estranged husband, and that after more than 20 years they had recovered her. He said that from the beginning their family had been right, that the investigators, the prosecution, the domestic violence expert, and the jury that originally found John guilty in 2010 had all been right, and that even Tina had been right when she shared with her sister before that fateful meeting that if anything happened to her in her attempt to collect a debt from her estranged husband, it would be by his doing. He said a confessed murderer was now going back to prison. Bob went on to describe how difficult it had been for the family to be asked to weigh in on a plea offer in exchange for learning where their loved one's body had been disposed of. He said they were a large family with a vast array of feelings, but that they had been able to come to a consensus on the plea. He said that however much they had all longed to recover Tina, it had nonetheless been very disturbing to receive word of a plea offer, and that they wrestled with the idea that by giving their consent, Tina's murderer would ultimately be released from prison, potentially much sooner than they might like, given credit for time already served and the prospect of early release for good behavior. He said they had wrestled with whether declining the offer and allowing a trial to proceed, which could again result in a life sentence without parole, was worth the personal sacrifice, whether accepting a plea might endanger another woman, and whether they could live with a longer sentence knowing they would likely never recover Tina. He said these had not been easy issues, but that in the end they had reached their decision as a family and were at peace with it. District Attorney Rourke also spoke at the plea agreement. He said that for 7,826 days, 3 hours, and 22 minutes, the location of Tina's remains had been a mystery, one that had haunted her family, the investigators who worked the case from the minute it was reported, and the community as a whole. He said that while the original conviction had served to hold the defendant accountable for the atrocious act he committed, the lingering question of her whereabouts had cast a shadow over the prosecution, and that over the course of the last week they had finally been able to give her family what they so desperately wanted, so that Tina could be returned to her family and finally laid to rest. Shortly after Tina's disappearance, police had examined tips about the graveyard burial and followed up on a tip about the possibility of John hiding Tina's body in an open grave. On the 19th of October, 1995, the day Tina was last seen alive, there had been 3 open graves. 2 of the graves had a concrete floor, and 1 did not. Police at the time spoke to employees at the cemetery. One employee told police that a body would not have been hidden there, as the concrete vaults had already been placed, and said he had even looked around the cemetery himself to see if anything was out of place, finding nothing. John was able to hide Tina's body in the middle of the night, before the burial. While some people had suspicions that Tina may have been buried at the cemetery, the only person who knew with absolute certainty was John, and the only reason he gave that information to police and to the prosecution was for his own benefit. John remained silent for 22 years. He only led authorities to Tina's remains so that he could spend less time in prison. Case 8. It was the 24th of September, 1992, Thursday. 23-year-old Dale Dinwiddie lived in Columbia, South Carolina, United States, with her parents, Dan and Jane Dinwiddie, and her 16-year-old brother, Drew. Dale had recently moved back home to Columbia after completing an art history degree at Randolph-Macon Women's College in Lynchburg, Virginia. She moved home to enroll at the University of South Carolina. While she waited for it to begin, she spent her time taking art classes and volunteering at the Columbia Museum of Art. She also babysat for the son of a family friend. The boy she looked after, John Parker, was just 8 years old, and that day, the 24th of September, Dale was due to collect him from the bus stop after school and walk him home. But that morning, at 6:15 a.m., her father, Dan, noticed she was not in her bedroom. Dan woke up early that morning to let the dog out. The dog slept in Drew's bedroom. But when he walked past Dale's bedroom, he saw that her bed had not been slept in, though her lights and radio were on. He asked Jean and Drew if they knew whether Dale had planned to spend the night at a friend's house. They said no. Dale was extremely responsible, and if she was ever running late or planned to go anywhere, she always let her parents know. She was also aware that if she ever needed a ride, they would drive to meet her anywhere and at any time. She had not been in touch with them since the night before. They were concerned as they knew she was due to meet John at the bus stop that day, and she would not leave him to walk home alone. John called John's mother to let her know Dale was not home, and to make sure John's mother would meet him at the bus stop instead. Dan contacted Dale's friends, but they confirmed she was not with them. Dan reported Dale missing to the police at 8:30 a.m. that morning. The night before, the 23rd of September, Dale went to see the band U2 in concert. It was not a concert she had initially planned to attend, but a friend asked her to go with him, and she accepted. He collected her and drove her to the concert at Williams-Brice Stadium. After the concert, Dale met a few friends at a local bar, Jungle Jim's, at 5 Points. At that time, 5 Points was a busy area. It remained busy throughout the night as it was a dining and shopping district located just east of Columbia's city center. At night, the bars were packed with people, and it was a favorite drinking destination for students at the nearby University of South Carolina. That night was no different. There were college students and others out partying. Police discovered that the concert ended around 11:15 p.m., and that was when Dale went to Jungle Jim's to meet her friends. Her friends left jungle gyms at 1 a.m. without her. When police spoke to her friends, they said they believed Dale had already left before them, as they could not find her at the bar. They said they believed she had either got a ride home or that her parents, who lived nearby, had collected her. But when police spoke to others at the bar, they discovered that Dale was still there after 1 a.m. She was looking for her friends and told the bouncer that she was stranded, asking if he knew where they were. That was around 1:15 a.m. She was last seen by the same bouncer at around 1:30 a.m., and he told police that he saw her walking north on Hardin Street, towards the Green and Hardin Streets intersection. According to the bouncer, she was alone and looked in a hurry. Dale did not take her purse with her. She left it at the bar. Thousands of flyers with Dale's picture on them were posted around South Carolina by Dale's family, friends, and hundreds of volunteers. Everyone who knew Dale knew she would not have run away. She hated to be alone. They believed something sinister must have happened to her. But police investigated the route she would have taken home and found nothing. Furthermore, nobody heard anything, and there was no evidence of foul play. At that time, 1:30 a.m., there were still a lot of people out partying. Nobody seemed to know anything. Due to the circumstances of Dale's disappearance, police believed she may have been kidnapped. They wondered if it was someone known to her, somebody who may have offered her a ride that she accepted. That would explain why nobody saw anything unusual or heard anything that night. Over the years that followed, police looked into a number of different leads and potential suspects. One such person was Reynaldo Javier Ray Rivera. Reynaldo admitted to murdering 4 women from Georgia and was a suspect in many more deaths. Reynaldo was from Puerto Rico but lived in Colombia and was a student at the University of South Carolina in 1992. He was convicted of a police officer's murder in 2004 and sentenced to death. No charges were filed against him in relation to Dale's case. Investigators never found any evidence to link him to Dale's disappearance. In 2012, with help from State Law Enforcement Division artist Debbie Goff, an age progression photograph of Dale was released. At that time, she would have been 43 years old, but there were still no leads in the case. A few years later, on the 29th of March, 2019, a 21-year-old woman, Samantha Josephson, was reported missing from the same area where Dale was last seen. It was a case eerily similar to Dale's. Samantha was last seen outside a 5 Points bar in downtown Columbia. Her roommates reported her missing the next morning, as she never made it home the night before. Police checked surveillance footage from the area and saw Samantha getting into a vehicle, a Chevy Impala, outside the bar. There was a crowd outside the bar, and it was busy. Samantha was on her phone and alone. She can be seen on the footage skipping towards the car and getting into the back seat. Police discovered that she had called an Uber around 2 a.m. to get a ride home when she could not find her friends. But the car she got into was not an Uber. Columbia Police Chief Skip Holbrook said that Samantha had in fact summoned an Uber ride, but had simply mistakenly got into a different car, thinking it was her Uber. Police believed that Samantha mistakenly thought the Chevy Impala was the Uber she had just ordered. The image of Samantha getting into the vehicle was the last known sighting of her. Police saw a car driving in the area the same day Samantha was reported missing that matched the description and appearance of the one seen on the surveillance footage, and they arrested the driver. The driver was 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland. Later that same day, turkey hunters near the town of New Zion, around an hour and a half's drive from downtown Columbia, found Samantha's body. The location where her body was found is less than 2 miles from Nathaniel's home. He was charged with murder and kidnapping in relation to Samantha's death. Samantha's parents could not identify her in the morgue due to the extent of her injuries. She was identified by DNA analysis. The autopsy revealed that Samantha died as a result of multiple sharp force injuries. She was stabbed more than 30 times with a bladed weapon. There were stab wounds from her feet to her face. Samantha suffered numerous wounds on multiple parts of her body, including her head, neck, face, upper body, leg, and foot. At Nathaniel's bond hearing, the court heard that when Nathaniel was arrested, blood found in his car matched Samantha's blood. The child safety locks were engaged, and police believed that as soon as Samantha was inside the car, he activated the child safety locks and refused to let her get out. Samantha's footprint was found on the window, indicating that she fought for her life and tried to get out of the car. At the hearing, the prosecution outlined the evidence they had against Nathaniel. The court heard that, along with her blood, Samantha's hair was also found in his car. The prosecution told the court that they had surveillance video of Nathaniel using Samantha's debit card and attempting to sell her phone. They told the court that Samantha's blood was found on Nathaniel's clothes and that the murder weapon was found at a home he had visited just prior to his arrest. The court also heard there was cell phone evidence that placed Nathaniel's phone and Samantha's phone in the same locations at the same time, including the location where Samantha's body was found. Nathaniel's attorney, Tracy Pinnock, told the court that Nathaniel was innocent until proven guilty, and that they were dealing with a bond hearing, not a trial. She asked the court to grant bond, as Nathaniel had no prior convictions, and she called some character witnesses to speak about the man they believed Nathaniel to be. Nathaniel's basketball coach and older brother told the court that the Nathaniel they knew was incapable of a violent crime. Nathaniel's mother, Lorette, said her son was not the monster he was being made out to be. At the bond hearing, she said there was no way he could have done this. That as a child he loved everyone, got along with everyone, did what he could for everyone, and was a very respectful man. The court heard from Samantha's parents at the bond hearing. Samantha's mother, Marcy Josephson, said there were no words to describe the incredible pain he had caused. She questioned whether he even knew her daughter's name, repeated her daughter's name, Samantha Josephson, and told the court never to forget it, saying shame on him. Marcy also told the court that Nathaniel was sick and evil and a danger to society. She said there were no words to describe the immense pain his actions had caused their family and friends, that he had brutally kidnapped and murdered her daughter, her baby, and locked her in the car without any way to escape. She said he had stolen her chance of identifying her daughter in the morgue due to the amount of torture he had put her through. That her daughter had only been identified by DNA, and that he posed a significant risk to others. She said she prayed he would hear her daughter's screams and picture the violent act he did whenever he closed his eyes or had a moment of peace, because that was what she saw and heard every day. Judge DeAndrea Benjamin denied Nathaniel's bond. His trial was scheduled for July 20 to 21. Samantha's family want other women to be safe. Her father, Seymour Josephson, said he wanted others to learn from what happened to his daughter, and in particular to be more careful using ride-hailing services. He said he did not want anyone else to go through this again, that what they had learned was that people should travel together, that if there were two of you, something was less likely to happen, and that Samantha had been by herself and had absolutely no chance. They fought to get a bill named after Samantha. The U.S. House of Representatives unanimously approved a bill that, in part, would force ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft to deploy technology that would match passengers with drivers before the ride began. A driver could not begin the trip until the passenger and driver verified each other's identities. It would also make it illegal to share ride-share signage and would require the government to examine ride-sharing companies' background checks. The bill was authored by U.S. Representative Chris Smith, RNJ, and awaited approval in the U.S. Senate. Uber released a safety report and said it had received nearly 6,000 allegations of serious SA nationwide over the course of 2017 and 2018. Both Uber and Lyft officials said they supported the new legislation. Like Dale, Samantha was a young, bright, loving woman who was simply on a night out. They both had so much to live for. Samantha was set to graduate in May 2019 and planned to attend law school on a scholarship she had earned at Drexel University in Philadelphia in the fall. But unlike Samantha's family, Dale's family have yet to find Dale. They still have no idea what happened to her. In 2020, there were rumors that an arrest was imminent in relation to Dale's case. An attorney was named, and there were rumors that he may be involved in Dale's disappearance due to a claim made by a woman who said the man had SA'd her and told her she reminded him of Dale. But no charges were brought against him in relation to Dale's case. And as such, Dale's case remains open and unsolved. Case 9. It was the 17th of June, 2019, a Monday. 23-year-old Mackenzie Lewick arrived at the Salt Lake International Airport in Utah, United States, in the early morning hours of that day. She had spent the weekend at home in California so that she could attend her grandmother's funeral, but return to Utah, as she was a student at the University of Utah. Mackenzie was a part-time senior at the University of Utah studying kinesiology and pre-nursing. As soon as she landed at the airport, she sent a text message to her parents, Gregory and Diana Luke, to let them know she had arrived in Utah. In the days that followed, Mackenzie's parents tried to contact her a number of times, but could not reach her. 4 days after Mackenzie was last seen at the airport, police were notified that she was missing. Her father called 911 and asked for a wellness check on his daughter, explaining that he had been trying to get hold of her all week. Her father told police that all of the calls went straight to voicemail, indicating her phone had been turned off or was no longer in service. Police went to Mackenzie's apartment to see if she was there. Her car was outside, but when they knocked on the door, there was no answer. There was no noise coming from the apartment either. She did not appear to be at home. They discovered that she had missed her midterm exams at the university between the 17th of June and the 20th of June. The last known sighting of her was when she landed at the airport in the early morning hours of the 17th. Police obtained Mackenzie's AT&T records, and they showed her phone had been turned off at 3 a.m. on the 17th of June. Mackenzie had a flight booked to return to California on the 23rd of June, and she did not board it. Through their investigation, police discovered that Mackenzie had hailed a Lyft to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake shortly after she landed at the airport on the 17th of June. Police searched several places in North Salt Lake and made door-to-door inquiries near Hatch Park. They tracked down the Lyft driver and spoke to him. The driver told police that he had driven Mackenzie to Hatch Park and that she met someone there. When they pulled into the parking lot, a maroon Subaru was already there. The driver saw a person get out of the vehicle and speak to Mackenzie. He believed the person was a woman. When asked how Mackenzie appeared, he said the situation seemed casual and that they were friendly with each other, with no cause for concern. When he collected her at the airport, she told him she was meeting a friend, so he presumed that was her friend. Police established that the driver picked up another customer straight after he dropped Mackenzie off, so he was eliminated as a possible suspect. He also continued working for the next few hours. Police began to look into Mackenzie's life and looked through her social media accounts. They also spoke to her friends. They confirmed that Mackenzie used dating apps online and was a member of Tinder, seeking arrangements and Call Her Daddy. Records from Text Me revealed several IP addresses that had been used to communicate with Mackenzie's phone on the day she disappeared. Police were able to trace one of the IP addresses to a man called Ayoola Ajayi, a 32-year-old tech support worker. On the 22nd of June, police went to Ayoola's house in Salt Lake City. Ayoola told police he did not know Mackenzie, but said he left his Wi-Fi open to the public because he operated an Airbnb out of his residence, so somebody else may have used the Wi-Fi to send her a message. Ayoola allowed police to look at his phone, and they asked him about an app installed on it called Seeking Arrangements. Seeking Arrangements is a sugar daddy or sugar mommy, sugar baby type dating website. Sugar babies are people who join the app looking to match with somebody who is usually older and wealthier than they are. The sugar babies can send the sugar daddy a list of requests, ranging from help paying tuition to designer bags and many other items. Ayoola did not say much to police while they were at his house, but when they left, he called them and told them he had received a text message from Mackenzie on the 16th of June at 6:12 p.m., which just contained a question mark. When asked if he replied to that text message, he said he had sent 2 words back to her: seeking arrangement. He confirmed to police that he had sent a photo of himself to Mackenzie because she asked for one, and told them that their communication ended immediately after he sent it. Police found Mackenzie's phone number saved in Ayoola's phone as the contact Text Me. Police began to look into Ayoola's activities. They obtained his phone records and discovered that his phone was in the same area of North Salt Lake at the same time Mackenzie was there. He was the last person Mackenzie had contact with via text, but he maintained that he was not there that night and did not meet Mackenzie. Police obtained surveillance video near the parking lot at Hatch Park. They saw the dark-colored 4-door sedan that the Lyft driver had told them about. It left shortly after the Lyft driver left. Police checked Ayoola's vehicle to compare it to the one from the surveillance footage. He drove a 2013 Kia Optima, and when they compared it to the image from the footage, they believed the characteristics of the vehicle on the video were consistent with the shape, size, and general appearance of a Kia Optima. On the 26th of June, police searched Ayoola's home. By that stage, there was still no sign of Mackenzie, and none of her friends or family had heard from her since the 17th of June. They also spoke to Ayoola again at the police station while his house was being searched. He asked police why he was being questioned and said it was terrible and that he just wanted it to be over. Ayoola told police that he had never met Mackenzie in person and that he was not at Hatch Park that night, that he was with his baby mama. And police asked him who his baby mama was, and he told them they used to date, and that he only knew her first name, not her last name, but that he remained in touch with her because she was pregnant with his baby girl. When police were questioning Ayoola, he began to hyperventilate, and police asked the medics to assess him. They helped him control his breathing. Ayoola gave police the password for his phone and laptop. They questioned him about the text messages he exchanged with Mackenzie. He again told police the communication had stopped after he sent her a photo she had requested. He claimed she stopped messaging after she saw that he was black, telling police that he had thought she did not want his race. Police asked him about the car seen at Hatch Park that looked like his. He told them he was not there, and that it would be weird to meet at that time of night, saying it was not safe for her or for him. Police told Ayula that the records they had obtained did not corroborate his story. They told him that his phone and records showed he was at Hatch Park that night, despite his denial. He again denied meeting Mackenzie. But what Ayula did not know at that point was that police had uncovered evidence at his home. There was a 6-foot by 7-inch area in his backyard, covered in a thin layer of mulch, and they found a piece of wood fencing with a smoke pattern in the shape of a wheelbarrow inside his garage. A cadaver dog alerted police to a certain area of the backyard that appeared to have been recently disturbed. Just behind Ayula's backyard, police checked the adjoining alleyway and found semi-burned items, including black clothing and a strap from a purse or backpack. When police spoke to his neighbors, one neighbor told them she had seen flames and smoke coming from Ayula's backyard around the 18th or 19th of June. The smoke was so bad that she told Ayula that if he did not call the fire department, she would. She said she saw him putting gas on the fire and dragging a hose toward it. When police asked Ayula about fires in his backyard, he told them he was burning plastic and wood. He also said he regularly burned animal carcasses, sheep and goats that he ate, in his backyard, explaining that he had killed lamb and goats in his backyard in the past and burned them instead of skinning them, and mentioning goat meat soup in his fridge. But the DNA profile that the crime lab developed from muscle tissue samples found in Ayula's backyard told a different story. It was confirmed to be a match to Mackenzie's DNA. Ayula was arrested and charged with aggravated murder, aggravated kidnapping, and desecration of a body. But even though there was a DNA match and police believed Mackenzie was dead, her body was not found in Ayula's backyard. Ayula's phone records showed that his phone pinged in Logan Canyon, which is 85 miles from the Salt Lake City, after Mackenzie went missing. Police searched the area and found Mackenzie's charred body. It was buried in a shallow grave with brush over it, in a wooded area of the canyon. Her arms were bound behind her back with rope. Mackenzie suffered blunt force trauma to her head. A hole was found on her skull with part of her scalp missing. An autopsy found that the blunt force trauma to the left side of her skull caused brain hemorrhaging that ultimately killed her. She had also been strangled. Ayula, in exchange for a plea deal, pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and desecrating a human body. The guilty plea was in exchange for life in prison without the possibility of parole, instead of going to trial and facing the possibility of the death penalty. In line with the plea deal, charges including obstruction of justice, aggravated kidnapping, and forcible SA were dropped. Ayula, through his attorney, outlined some of what had happened to Mackenzie. The court heard that they met in 2018 via the website Seeking Arrangements. They were in contact and agreed to meet when Mackenzie returned to Utah from California. His attorney told the court that Ayula had decided he would murder Mackenzie before the meeting even took place. The fact that he planned the murder before even meeting Mackenzie was evident from his actions that night. He turned off the security video cameras at his home before he drove to Hatch Park to meet her. The court heard that as soon as they arrived back at his house, he tied her hands behind her back and began choking her. He admitted that he strangled her at his Salt Lake home, burned her body, and buried her in his backyard. When police, who were initially just carrying out door-to-door inquiries, knocked on his door, he removed her body and buried her in the canyon. The court also heard that when Ayula attacked Mackenzie inside his home, she pleaded for him to stop, but he did not. Instead, he turned her onto her stomach and used a belt to choke her until she stopped moving. The judge in the case said that each of the charges was extremely serious and egregious on its own merit, and that as such, she would sentence him to consecutive terms, meaning he would never leave prison. She told him that the crimes were the worst of the worst. At his sentencing hearing, 2 other criminal charges Ayula faced were also dealt with. They did not relate to Mackenzie's case. In a separate matter, he was charged with aggravated kidnapping and 3 counts of forcible SA against a woman he met on a dating app in 2018. He also faced 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor due to material, namely, numerous images of children aged 4 to 8 years old engaged in sex acts, which police found on his computer when they were searching for evidence in relation to Mackenzie's case. The material itself was not connected to Mackenzie's case. Ayula admitted to forcible SA. The court heard that he assaulted a woman during a March 2018 date at his home. The woman in question came forward and reported the matter to police when she saw coverage of Mackenzie's death. The 19 felony charges relating to material found on his computer were dismissed as part of the plea deal. No motive was given by Ayula as to why he decided to kill Mackenzie before he even met her. But there were dark signs in his past. A construction contractor, Brian Wolf, told police that Ayula had contacted him because he wanted him to build a secret, soundproof room underneath his porch. Ayula wanted hooks to be fitted and mounted high, above head height, on a concrete wall, and for access to the room to be via a fingerprint thumb lock only. Ayula claimed he wanted a secret room to hide alcohol, as his girlfriend was a Mormon. Brian declined the job. At Ayula's sentencing, Mackenzie's father, Gregory, told Ayula that he hoped he would spend the rest of his life in isolation. He said he looked forward to the day he received the call that Ayula had died, saying he could only hope it would be a slow, painful death. Case 1. It was the 13th of October, 1992, a Tuesday. 22-year-old Corey Wienicke was at home in West Liberty, Iowa, United States. The night before, he had worked a late-night shift at his grandparents' restaurant, Wink's Bar and Grill. He worked there most nights as a bartender and was due to work again that night. So when his fiancée, Jody Hotz, arrived home at around 6:30 p.m., she was surprised to see his car still in the driveway and Corey's dog, a golden Labrador retriever called Casey, outside. Corey was a popular football player and well known in the area. He had played for the West Liberty High School Comets and made it to the state championships. When he began dating Jody, they seemed like a good match, and they made plans for their future. They moved to a farmhouse outside of town. Jody worked at a bank in Iowa City during the day, and as Corey worked at night, he was normally gone by the time she got home. So when she returned that evening, and it appeared he was still home, she was worried. Jody noticed that their dog was unchained outside, which was not normal, and that the screen door to their home was wide open. Jody walked up to the house and found the main door unlocked. She walked around the house and found Corey. He was lying on the floor of the bedroom and was not moving. She called 911 to report that her fiancé was dead, telling the dispatcher that he was covered in blood, was not breathing, and was cold. Police arrived at the farmhouse and confirmed that Corey was dead. He had sustained multiple blunt force injuries, including one that fractured his skull. He had been beaten to death. Police spoke to Jody. She told them that he was supposed to be at work and that she had last seen him that morning at 8:30 a.m. when she left the house for work. He had been asleep at the time. Corey was seen returning home from Iowa City around 7 a.m. that morning. Police did not believe that a robbery had taken place, as nothing was missing. It seemed to be a targeted attack. Somebody had entered the house, it appeared, with the intention of beating Corey. When police widened their investigation and news of Corey's death broke, a farmer told police that he had driven past Corey's house at 1:30 p.m. that afternoon and had seen a metal baseball bat on the side of the road near the house. He had driven past earlier that morning, around 9 a.m., and had not seen the bat at that time. Because of that, police believed Corey was killed between 9 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. And police managed to retrieve the bat, and traces of blood found on it matched Corey's blood type. Police believed the bat was the murder weapon, as the injuries Corey had sustained were in line with the type of injuries a bat could inflict. The bat was sent for forensic testing and was later confirmed to be the murder weapon. But even though police had the murder weapon, no fingerprints or DNA evidence was found on it. Police believed Corey knew his killer. There was no evidence to suggest it was a random killing. They believed it could be connected to a relationship Corey had with a woman who was not Jody. Police discovered that Corey was seeing multiple women at the time of his death, and that in turn led to many possible suspects. They interviewed more than 400 people in the months following his death. Despite that, the case went cold. 10 years after Corey's death, police still had nothing solid and were not sure what the motive was. Sergeant Mark Kopf of the Muscatine County Sheriff's Office made a public appeal, urging anyone who knew something about the case to come forward. Police needed someone to come forward and share details of what they knew. They got the break they needed some 25 years after Corey was murdered, and the information they received came down to a chance encounter in December 2017. In December 2017, Special Agent Trent Valletta of the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation went to a hospital in Iowa to talk to a witness in an entirely separate matter. While he was there, he spoke to a nurse called Jessica Becker. Agent Valletta told her that he worked on cold cases. That prompted her to share a story with him about a time when she was just 9 years old. Jessica told Agent Valletta that she had witnessed an incident in 1992. One night, she stayed at her friend's house for a sleepover. That friend was the daughter of Jacques Hazen. Jacques was the sister-in-law of Annette Cahill. Police were familiar with Annette. They had spoken to her after Corey's murder, as they discovered she was one of 4 women he was having a sexual relationship with at the time of his death. But at the time, Annette told police she was shopping in Iowa City with Jacques when Corey was murdered, and Jacques produced store receipts to support the claim. Jessica told Agent Valletta that when she stayed over at Jacques' house after Corey's murder, she sneaked downstairs with her friend after bedtime. When they got to the bottom of the stairs, she heard Annette in the dining area and saw her from behind. According to Jessica, Annette was crying and lighting black candles, and Jessica heard her repeatedly apologize to Corey, say that she had never meant to hurt or kill him, and tell him that she loved him. Jessica said she went back upstairs so that Annette would not see her. She told Agent Valletta that she had told her mother about it afterwards, but her mother did not want to report it to the police. Based on his conversation with Jessica, Agent Valletta looked at the investigation surrounding Corey's death again. In the file, they found a report from an interview that took place in 1996 with a man called Scott Payne. Scott was friends with Jacques and Annette. The report noted that, according to Scott, Annette had been seen burning a quantity of items after Corey was killed. Scott was re-interviewed. He said he remembered seeing Annette burning blood-stained clothing in a barrel at Jack's house. When asked when that was, he said it was around 1 or 2 days after Corey was murdered. He claimed Annette had told him she was burning the clothing because there was paint on it. However, he told police that he believed it was blood, not paint, and that he was familiar with blood, as he worked at a meatpacking house, slaughtering pigs. Police arrested and charged Annette with first-degree murder. She was 56 years old at the time of her trial. It was the prosecution's case that she had committed first-degree murder by killing Corey willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought. That trial ended in a mistrial, as the jury could not reach a verdict. After nearly a full day of deliberations, the jury could not reach a unanimous conclusion on the possible verdict. They initially voted 11-1 to acquit. The judge gave them more time to deliberate, but when they were called back into court again, they were still deadlocked, so a mistrial was declared. Annette was tried again. At Annette's second trial, it was the prosecution's case that she had killed Corey in a jealous rage over his engagement and the fact that he had a sexual relationship with other women. The court heard that Corey was struck 13 times and that all the blows had been inflicted while he was alive. The prosecution told the jury that the murder weapon, a bat, was found 1 mile from Corey's house. It was initially found by a reporter who could not get his car to start, walked down a gravel road, and found it at the side of the road. A farmer confirmed he had seen it there at 1:30 p.m. The bat had white tape around the handle and a blue barrel with Power Flight Heavyweight in white lettering on it. The white lettering appeared to have blood stains on it. The court heard that the bat had been bought at a Walmart and could have been left over from the previous year's inventory. It had a $15 retail price and had been bought on sale for $13. The court heard that the cause of death was blunt force trauma. The court heard that the night before Corey's murder, when he was at work, Annette showed up. Corey left Winks at closing time with a woman called Wendy Marshall. When police spoke to Wendy at the time, she told them that when they left the bar, they were confronted by Annette, who was waiting for Corey in his car. She was drunk, and Corey offered to drive her home. Wendy and Corey got into his car with Annette. According to Wendy, at one point on their way to Annette's house, Annette became agitated and jumped out of the car. Corey got out and spoke to her. He dropped Wendy back at Winks, as her own car was parked there, and then dropped Annette home. He met up with Wendy later that night. By the next morning, Corey was back at his home and asleep in bed when Jody left for work. The court heard witness testimony from Jessica Becker and her mother. Jessica told the court about what she had seen one night when she was 9 years old. The same details she had shared with Agent Veleda. Her mother confirmed that Jessica had told her what she saw at the time, but she had not reported it because she was afraid of what might happen to them, given how brutal and vicious the attack on Corey had been. The court also heard from Scott Payne, who had not testified at Annette's first trial. He shared with the court the details he had previously given police, namely that he had seen Annette burning what he believed was blood-stained clothing. It was the defense's case that Annette had an alibi and did not kill Corey. The court heard that there was no physical evidence linking Annette to Corey's murder. Hairs found in Corey's hand had not been linked to Annette. No fingerprints or blood connected to Annette were found on the bat. According to Annette, she saw Corey the night before he was murdered. She was jealous when she saw him with another woman, but said they made up and had sex. Annette claimed she spent the next day working a roofing job with Jacques, and that when she called at Corey's house that morning, she believed there was nobody home, as there was no answer when she knocked on the door. In relation to Annette's defense, that she was at a construction job site and then went shopping with Jacques the day Corey was murdered. The prosecution argued that the receipts did not cover the time Corey was killed. Jacques testified that she had picked Annette up at the job site around 10 a.m., and that they stopped at Corey's house on the way to Iowa City, as Annette wanted to drop a book back, but that nobody was home, and nobody answered the door, so they went on to Iowa City. Jacques provided receipts for that trip in relation to purchases she made, but the only one with a timestamp was marked with a purchase made at 1:25 p.m. The defense tried to discredit Jessica. The court heard it was the defense's case that she was biased because Annette had had a sexual relationship with Jessica's stepfather when Jessica was a child. The jury deliberated and at one point told the judge they were deadlocked. The foreperson told the judge that he did not believe more time for deliberations would result in a unanimous verdict. The judge asked them to sleep on it and return the next day for further deliberations, which they did. After a total of 16 hours of deliberations, the jury announced that they had reached a unanimous decision. They found Annette guilty of second-degree murders. Annette filed a post-trial motion to compel discovery relating to the hairs found in Corey's hand. She asked that the state provide any other information about the testing performed on the hairs. If the evidence had been lost or destroyed, Annette asked the court to order the state to explain how that had happened. She asked the court for a new trial based on a Brady violation and on the unfairness of the jury lacking a spoliation instruction based on the destroyed evidence. The court denied the motion, and she was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Annette appealed her conviction on a number of different grounds. One argument concerned the prosecution witnesses. At the outset of her trial, Annette had sought to exclude the testimony of Jessica Becker, Jessica's mother, and Scott Payne. That motion had been denied. On appeal, Annette claimed that Jessica's account of what she saw could not be true, arguing that 1. Jessica could not have seen Annette in the dining area while standing on the stairs because the stairway was fully enclosed and had a door at the base that opened out and away from the stairs. 2. Jessica was unable to recall other details of the home's layout, even though she claimed to have spent the night there many times over the years. 3. Jessica did not recall the date of the sleepover or whether other children were present that night. Annette also argued that Scott's testimony could not be trusted, claiming there were contradictions between statements he made to police in 1996 and 2019. Another argument in Annette's appeal was based on the hairs found in Corey's hand. She argued that there were 4 human hairs in his hand and that the state had presented no evidence that the hair matched Annette's. The appeal also pointed out that if there was hair in his hand, he must have been aware of the attack. Annette argued that there must have been more than one attacker, as Corey was a football player, an experienced fighter, and weighed 230 pounds. Annette argued that there was insufficient evidence to show she committed the murder. The court stated that it would uphold the verdict if it was supported by substantial evidence that, viewed in the light most favorable to the state, could convince a rational fact finder that the defendant was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Annette highlighted a number of points that she said indicated insufficient evidence in her case. 1. She never confessed to the murder. 2. There was no physical evidence linking her to the murder. 3. There were no eyewitnesses to Corey's murder. 4. There was no witness who could place her with the bat or murder weapon. 5. There was no witness or indication that she had planned to attack Corey. Annette argued that the only evidence the prosecution had was the testimony of Jessica's mother, and Scott Payne. On that basis, She requested that her conviction be set aside. The court disagreed. Annette lost her appeal, and her conviction and 50-year sentence stood. The court noted that although the evidence was not overwhelming, when viewed in the light most favorable to the state, it did not fall short of the substantial evidence threshold. Case 2. It was the 12th of November, 2002, a Tuesday. 14-year-old Terry and 11-year-old Caitlin Marsh arrived home at 4 p.m. that afternoon. They had been at school that day and expected to find their mother, 48-year-old Heather Barnett, waiting for them at home. But when they entered their ground-floor apartment in Bournemouth, Dorset, England, United Kingdom, they were met with silence. Their mother worked from home as a seamstress, so it was unusual for her not to be at home. Terry went into his bedroom to change his clothes while Caitlin called out for Heather. There was no reply. Caitlin knocked on the closed bathroom door and, when there was no answer, opened it slightly. Terry heard her scream and ran to see what was wrong. Their mother was lying on her back on the bathroom floor. There was blood everywhere. Heather was dead. She had been violently stabbed and her body had been mutilated. One of her hands was holding a clump of hair. Terry called police and told them that their mother had been murdered and that they needed help immediately. When police arrived, they discovered there were no signs of any forced entry. Did Heather know her killer? Police believed Heather had been murdered in her sewing room, as there were spatter stains on the patio doors of that room. There was a trail of blood from that room through the living room and into the bathroom where her body was found. There was a large pool of blood underneath her body. Heather's bra had been cut between the cups. Her throat was slashed from ear to ear. Both of Heather's breasts had been cut off and placed on the floor beside her body. Police traced the blood found in the apartment using luminol. And based on faint footprints, it appeared that whoever killed Heather had walked back from the bathroom towards her sewing room. The footprints then stopped at the hall beside the front door, which indicated that the person responsible may have removed their shoes before leaving. Police began their investigation. Heather was last seen that morning. She had dropped the children off at school, and CCTV footage showed her white Fiat Punto turning into Capstone Road, where she lived shortly afterwards. Just one day after Heather's murder, her son Terry told police that her keys had gone missing the week before. He told police that they went missing after an Italian man called Danny called at the apartment. Danny had asked Heather to make curtains for him. Police carried out door-to-door inquiries 5 days after Heather's murder. A man called Danilo Restivo lived just across from Heather's apartment. When police called at his apartment, they found his Nike trainers in the bath, soaking in bleach. Invisible traces of blood were later found inside the trainers. Danilo had moved to England to marry a woman called Fiamma Marsango, whom he had met online. That woman lived across from Heather, and he had moved in with her in May 2012. Police believed Danilo was the person who murdered Heather, but they did not have enough evidence to charge him. They feared he was a danger to others, and they kept him under surveillance. That surveillance continued for some time, and through it, police discovered other things about Danilo. In May 2004, police observed him following women. And on one occasion, when he was stopped and searched, he had a large knife and a packet of tissues in his bag. In the boot of his car, police found a hooded jacket, a balaclava, and gloves, and they found 2 pairs of scissors inside the car. Police also bugged his home and listened to his conversations with his wife and to calls he made and received. In one of the covert recordings, he was heard speaking of his love of touching and holding women's hair. Police discovered that reports had been made by 15 women in the United Kingdom and 9 women in Italy in relation to incidents involving their hair being cut. The women were either traveling by bus or sitting in the cinema when a man cut their hair. One woman, Holly Stroud, was asked in 2004 if she could pick out the man responsible from an identity parade, and she identified Danilo as the man who had cut her hair while she traveled to school the year before. Danilo's fetish for cutting women's hair was of interest to police because of the clump of hair found in Heather's hand. Danilo was arrested in 2006, and his home was searched again. Police found a lock of hair tied with green cotton. Danilo claimed it had been planted. Police did not have enough evidence to charge him with Heather's murder, so he was released. As the years went on and technology and tests improved, scientists continued to re-examine the material recovered from Heather's apartment and the traces of blood on Danilo's trainers. In 2008, scientists made a link between DNA material found on a green towel recovered from Heather's apartment and Danilo. Even though it was a great break in the case, police needed more evidence to ensure the prosecution could secure a conviction. They did not believe they had enough to charge him with Heather's murder. That changed in 2010. In 2010, the body of 16-year-old Elisa Claps was found in the loft of the Church of the Most Holy Trinity in Potenza, Italy. Elisa had been missing since the 12th of September 1993, and the last person she had been seen with was Danilo. Like Heather, Elisa had suffered brutal chest and stab wounds. Elisa's remains revealed cuts to her bones, which indicated she had received at least 9 stab wounds from behind and 3 from the front. The stab wound that went through the front of her neck to her spinal cord may have been caused by scissors. Her trousers, top, bra, and underwear had been cut with scissors. Her trousers had been lowered. There was hair found in each hand, and it had been cut from her own head after her death. Because of the similarities between the two murders, police arrested and charged Danilo with Heather Barnett's murder. When he was arrested and charged, police told Danilo that a blood-stained green towel had been found in Heather's apartment and that a DNA profile linked to him had been found on it. He told police that it was his towel, but that he had given it to Heather to use as a color sample for curtains he wanted her to make for him. Danilo pleaded not guilty. It was the prosecution's case that Danilo had killed and mutilated Heather. The prosecution warned the jury that the details they would hear throughout the trial would be harrowing and distressing. The prosecutor, Michael Bowes, QC, opened his case with the factual details of what had happened that day, telling the jury that on the 12th of November 2002, 2 children, aged 14 and 11, had come home from school in Bournemouth to find their mother brutally murdered and her body mutilated with a knife. She had been killed by repeated forceful blows to the head, and her body had then been dragged to the bathroom in the flat, where her children found her. The children found their mother not only dead, but brutally mutilated. The jury heard the harrowing account Terry had given to police at the time. The prosecutor described how Terry had sensed something was wrong because of the unusual silence, how he noticed the bathroom door was closed, how Caitlin opened it a little, and how both children then discovered their mother lying dead on the bathroom floor. The jury heard that Terry had told police the silence made him feel something was wrong even though nothing looked out of place, and the video of Terry's account was played in full. He had told police at the time that as soon as he saw the blood, it was clear it was no accident and that his mother had been murdered. The court heard that just after the children found the body, Danilo and Fiamma arrived home and comforted them. The court heard that there was no sign of any forced entry, and the prosecution believed that Heather had either opened the front door for Danilo that day or that he had let himself in using Heather's keys, which had gone missing a week earlier. The prosecution told the jury about Danilo's fetish for hair and the jury heard about him cutting women's hair on buses and at the cinema. 2 schoolgirls reported having their hair cut while Danilo was sitting directly behind them on the bus, and one of the girls said there was something white and sticky in her hair afterwards. Another man described a different occasion when he saw Danilo sitting behind a woman on a bus, with her hair and his hands under a jacket placed on his lap. The court heard about Danilo's visits to the park that police observed while he was under surveillance. He was filmed watching women, and on some occasions he hid in the long grass to avoid detection. He always wore gloves, even when the weather was good, and changed his shirt and trainers regularly when out. Hair was found in Heather's hand, but the identity of the person it belonged to was not known. Tests revealed that the person had recently changed their diet and had visited Florida, but despite appeals, a match was not found. It was the prosecution's case that Danilo had murdered Heather in a premeditated manner, one made all the worse by his knowledge that her children would find her body inside their home. The jury were told that he then tried to conceal what he had done, and in a deliberate attempt to remove any forensic link to the scene, placed his shoes in bleach. In relation to the towel found inside Heather's home, the prosecution told the court that they believed Danilo may have used it to wipe Heather's blood from himself, and simply forgot to take it with him. The pathologist, Dr. Alan Anscombe, testified. He told the court that he had arrived at Heather's apartment at 8:45 p.m. and that she was lying on her back on the bathroom floor with her legs straight. Dr. Anscombe testified that Heather's right hand rested on her lower belly and that a clump of light brown hair was resting in the palm of her hand. Her upper clothing had been pulled up to the level of her breasts, and her jeans had been unfastened and slightly pulled down. Heather's breasts had been cut off and placed on the floor on either side of her head. He believed a knife or another sharp instrument had been used, and he noted that there was nothing to suggest any great skill had been used. The court heard that Heather's throat had been completely cut across. Heather's trousers had been open and lowered, and a gloved hand had been placed inside her underwear. But the court heard there was no suggestion of SA. There was a trail of blood from the workroom through the living room and into the bathroom where her body was found, and there was a large pool of blood beneath her body. When asked whether he could state an exact time of death with certainty, Dr. Anscombe said he could not, but that it was likely closer to the time she was last seen alive in the morning than to the time of 4 p.m. when she was found. The court heard that the day after Heather's body was found, Dr. Anscombe carried out a post-mortem examination, and his report identified 10 separate injuries to Heather's head. One of the injuries was so severe that it had penetrated through to the skull, revealing brain tissue. There was a shallow 24-centimeter interrupted cut running vertically down the front of her abdomen and 2 smaller, separate wounds on either side. There were further injuries to Heather's hands. Dr. Anscombe testified that the injuries were not random and appeared to have been carried out with a degree of care and control. There was a lack of bleeding in relation to some of Heather's injuries, which indicated that they had been carried out when she was already dead. Dr. Anscombe determined that the cause of death was multiple head injuries. He believed that a weapon, such as a form of hammer, had been used. The court heard about the death of Elisa Claps and the discovery of her body in the loft of a church in Potenza, southern Italy, in March 2010. The prosecution said there were striking similarities between the murders of Elisa and Heather. Elisa had been repeatedly stabbed, and hair had been cut from her own head and placed beside her body. Elisa's bra had been cut at the front, and Heather's bra had been cut in the same way. The prosecutor said the cut hair at both murder scenes was akin to a hallmark. The prosecution told the court that Danilo had been interested in Elisa, but that she was not interested in him romantically. he arranged to meet her at the Church of the Most Holy Trinity in Potenza at 11:30 a.m. And the prosecutor told the jury that after their meeting, she was not seen again. It had been a busy Sunday morning when they met. People were out and about, and a lot of people attended the church. Elisa had been reluctant to meet Danilo that day. She was aware of rumors about him and had heard about his fetish for cutting hair. But Elisa felt sorry for him when she discovered he had bought her a gift for passing her retakes, so she went along to meet him. Even though suspicion immediately fell on Danilo, he claimed he saw her leave the church and that he had stayed on to pray. Danilo got home 1 hour later with a cut on his hand. When police asked him about the cut on his hand, he told them he had fallen on a building site. In 1995, Danilo was convicted in Italy of giving false information to the prosecutor over the injury to his hand, sustained on the day Elisa disappeared. At that point, no body had been found and no further charges were brought. Elisa's body was found under a pile of old tiles in the loft in the 2010. In relation to Elisa's case, the court heard that an inquiry was taking place in Italy and that Elisa's murder was not a matter for the jury to decide. They were to decide and return a verdict only in relation to Heather's case. It was the defense's case that Danilo was not involved in Heather's murder and that the DNA found on the towel only indicated that it was his towel. He did not deny that, but claimed he had given it to Heather to use as a color match only. Danilo also claimed he had an alibi and had been working on a computer at an educational center around the time Heather was murdered. But the court heard that an evidential capture by a digital forensics expert showed there was no user activity on the computer between 9:08 a.m. and 10:10 a.m. The jury deliberated for 5 hours and found Danilo guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison. At the sentencing hearing, Mr. Justice Burnett told Danilo that the murder was so serious that no minimum term would be appropriate. He described the exceptionally high seriousness of the offense, the depravity of the killing, the careful planning and preparation, its sexual content, and the previous killing of Elisa Claps, and concluded that the alternative starting point of a 30-year minimum term would not be appropriate. He said he could find no mitigation, that none had been advanced on Danilo's behalf, and that in his judgment there was no minimum period that could properly be set, and that Danilo would never be released from prison. The judge said Heather's murder was one of inhuman depravity. He told Danilo that he had known an 11-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy would find their mother butchered on the bathroom floor, and that this feature of the case would haunt those who had sat through it. He said that although he did not know why Danilo had picked Heather Barnett as his victim, it was clear he had done so to satisfy a sadistic sexual appetite, and that the evidence showed him to be a cold, depraved, calculated killer. The court also heard Caitlin's victim impact statement. She spoke of the horror of finding her mother in that way and described how, when police told her that her mother was dead, she felt as if her heart had been ripped out. She said she had been in a state of complete and utter shock and that it had taken months before she accepted the truth, that she had understood the words used but felt that such things did not happen to people like her mom. Caitlin also referred to how her life had changed as a result of that day. She said she no longer liked going into bathrooms, that she used to think someone might be waiting for her, and that she now held a fear of what was behind the bathroom door. She said it had been several years before she accepted the help of a child psychologist to cope with what had happened, that her mom was no longer able to help her celebrate her successes or pull her through disappointments, and that she would never again get the chance to tell her how much she loved her and how much she now missed her. She said the only person she could now fully trust and rely upon was Terry, and that her mom had been taken from her. She said the home she had shared with her mom was now tainted with someone else's violent actions, that she had not been back there since, and that she could not face even going near their old front door, as it reminded her too much of the horror that had awaited her and her brother. Danilo was sentenced to serve life in prison, a whole life sentence, which meant there would be no possibility of parole. The family of Elisa Claps claimed that Danilo should have been in prison in Italy and should not have been allowed to live in the United Kingdom and given an opportunity to kill Heather. Elisa's brother, Gildo, and mother, Philomena, claimed that the church where Elisa's body was found had never been searched properly. They also claimed that no search warrant had been issued to search Danilo's home at the time, despite everyone knowing that Elisa was not seen again after meeting him. Some people in Italy believed that Danilo was protected because his father was the director of the National Library in Italy. Claims have even been made that people knew where Elisa's body was, but that nothing was done. Before Elisa's body was found, there were numerous rumors about what had happened to her. There was talk of Elisa being seen in a white Fiat Uno, either in Potenza or Rome, that an Albanian was involved in her disappearance, and that she had been sold into prostitution. There were suspicious deaths. 3 people with small links to the case died in car crashes. Elisa's diary was found to have a page missing, and tests on the pieces of paper left attached revealed that words had been written in Albanian. There was also talk of a church cover-up. Despite all the rumors, a trial went ahead, and Danilo was charged with murder. Danilo was found guilty in his absence of the murder of Elisa by an Italian court and sentenced to a 30-year prison term. The Criminal Cases Review Commission took an interest in Danilo's trial in the United Kingdom. A man called Omar Benguit had been convicted of killing South Korean student Jong Ok-shin in July 2002. Jong had been stabbed to death 3 streets from Heather's home. Omar was tried 3 times for the murder. The first 2 trials ended in mistrials. His legal team appealed based on their belief that Danilo, not Omar, had actually killed Jong. But the appeal was lost and his conviction was upheld. Danilo appealed against the whole life term he had been given in relation to Heather's murder. His lawyer argued that the judge should not have taken Elisa's murder into account when sentencing, as he had not been convicted of Elisa's murder at that stage. The Court of Appeal agreed and altered his minimum sentence to 40 years instead. Case 3. It was the 4th of May, 2010, a Tuesday. 38-year-old bookmaker Suzanne Pilley was due at work at 9 a.m. that morning. She worked at Infrastructure Management on Thistle Street in Edinburgh, Scotland, United Kingdom, and had worked there for almost 2 years. When her co-workers realized that Suzanne was not at her desk that morning, so out of character for her, they contacted her parents. Her parents, Robert and Sylvia Pilley, had last heard from her that morning at 8:30 a.m. when she sent them a text message saying she was on her way to work. The fact that she did not start her workday as normal made her parents concerned that something had happened to her on the way in. They had not heard from her since that early text message and reported her missing to police that afternoon. In the days that followed, police put out appeals and spoke to those who knew Suzanne. There was no activity on her bank cards or mobile phone. She did not use her bus pass, and she did not contact any friends or family. Her family did not believe she would have decided to leave without telling anyone. She had fish and a cat, and they were still at home. Her father, Robert, said at the time that it was as if she had been swallowed up by some sort of Bermuda Triangle, that it was beyond belief. that she had texted him and her mom, but within half an hour was gone, and that he did not know how someone could vanish into thin air. He said she had no history of anything like this, that she was not depressed or worried, that it was so out of character, and that she had been just as usual when she left for work. Police obtained CCTV footage from the area, and through it they discovered that Suzanne had started her day as normal and taken her usual route into work that morning. Suzanne left her apartment on Whitson Road at 8 a.m. 20 minutes later, she boarded a number 2 bus at Stevenson Drive before taking the number 4 on Dalry Road, opposite Caledonian Terrace. Suzanne got off that bus on Princess Street outside Jenner's at 8:48 a.m. She then went into a Sainsbury's convenience store beside her workplace, something she did most mornings, and was seen on CCTV there at 8:51 a.m. She then made her way to her work at Infrastructure Management on Thistle Street. She was last seen on CCTV at the building on the corner beside her workplace, just 50 meters from her office front door, before she seemingly vanished. A black cab was stopped close to where Suzanne was last seen at 8:55 a.m. Police did not believe the driver was involved in Suzanne's disappearance, but appealed for him to come forward to assist with their investigation. As the search for Suzanne went on, police believed they were dealing with foul play. They began looking into Suzanne's personal life and discovered that she may have been involved in a love triangle. Suzanne was a single woman, but police discovered that she had dated a co-worker and that the relationship had recently ended when Suzanne met a new partner. Police looked at her mobile records to get a better understanding of her personal life. They spoke to those closest to Suzanne, and her neighbors confirmed they had seen a man apparently living with her for around 6 months. Police spoke to a man called David Gilroy. David was a married man and one of Suzanne's co-workers. David and Suzanne had had an affair, and he had lived with Suzanne at one point. He was questioned by police and told them that the relationship had ended in December 2009, that he had moved back home to be with his wife and children, and that he was trying to make that work. He told police that Suzanne was dating other men. A couple of weeks after Suzanne went missing, David reported a break-in to police. He told them that someone had broken into his house while he was asleep and stolen his mobile phone and laptop. According to David, when his wife got up, she found the back door had been broken in. They had heard a small noise, but nothing major. When asked whether he believed the break-in was connected to Suzanne's disappearance, he said he did not know. The investigation then took a more worrying and sinister twist. Police revealed that they were looking for the driver of a silver car that may have stopped in a remote forest. They announced that they were looking into the movements of a car on remote roads across Argyle and Butte on the afternoon and evening of the 5th of May, the day after Suzanne was last seen. In particular, they wanted to hear from anyone who had seen that car between 1 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. and between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. The public were also informed that the police investigation had changed from a missing person case to a murder investigation. Police revealed they were conducting a search covering some 400 square miles of rural Argyle and Butte. They believed that Suzanne had been murdered and that her body had been dumped or buried somewhere around 90 miles away from where she was last seen. The investigation focused on the Rest and Be Thankful and Argyle Forest, but despite extensive searches, nothing was found. Police later narrowed the search area to 5 square miles and believed that Suzanne's body might be buried in Glen Crow, Argyle, and Butte. Despite the fact that Suzanne had not been found and there was no body, police believed they had enough evidence to charge David Gilroy with murder. The challenging murder inquiry saw police speak to nearly 1,500 potential witnesses and take 1,164 statements. They gathered 2,325 productions to use in evidence and obtained CCTV footage from 250 separate locations. They also searched 30 different areas in Argyle. It was the prosecution's case that even though there was no body, the evidence would show that Suzanne had been murdered, and that she had been murdered by David. Prosecution told the court that David and Suzanne had been in a relationship, having met at work, but that Suzanne ended the relationship just before she went missing, because she had met someone else. Suzanne's mother testified. Sylvia told the court that her daughter had married in 2004 and divorced, that she had bought her own apartment in Edinburgh, and that David had moved into the apartment in 2009. Sylvia told the court that David had left his wife and was seeking a divorce, and that Suzanne was not the cause of the breakup. The court heard that David was obsessed with Suzanne and had sent more than 400 texts in the month before she went missing. He did not want the relationship to be over. Phone records showed that David was in contact with Suzanne almost daily before her disappearance, texting her more than 50 times a day. He last contacted her the day before she went missing, the 3rd of May, when he sent 15 text messages and 1 voicemail. It was the prosecution's case that Suzanne headed into work as normal on the 4th of May, and that David was waiting for her and strangled her almost as soon as she entered the office block, after possibly luring her to the basement. It was their case that he then hid her body in the basement level of their office and returned home to get his car, a silver Vauxhall Vectra. The prosecution believed that David put Suzanne's body in the boot of his car. The court heard that David bought air fresheners and repeatedly visited the basement and garage areas of the infrastructure management offices that same day, with no reason to be there. David then went about the rest of his day as normal. He went to a presentation at his daughter's school with his wife, and they then went for a meal at Victoria on Leith Walk. The court heard that on the night of the 4th of May, he made an appointment to visit a school and went there the next day, the 5th of May. David claimed he was going on a site visit to a school in Loch Gilphead in Argyle and Bute. The school was a client of his employer, but there was no need for him to be there that day. He called at the school, and a cleaner gave him bin bags and cable ties. Police reconstructed his trip to Argyle via CCTV and his mobile phone records. The court heard that there were gaps of several hours on both his outward and return journeys between Loch Gilphead and Inverary, and that the journey took 2 hours longer each way than it should have. It was the prosecution's case that he hid Suzanne's body somewhere in that area, an area he knew well, and where the court heard he had gone on walking holidays with Suzanne before. When David's car was examined, vegetative matter was found on it, and there were 3 fractured coil springs, which the prosecution argued indicated it had been driven off-road. The court also heard that David had turned off his phone at one point during the journey. The court heard that cadaver dogs, which can identify the smell of human remains, showed interest in the boot of David's Vauxhall Vectra and in areas of the basement at the office block. The court heard that on the 6th of May, when David went to the police station to give a statement, it was observed that he had scratches on his hands, a cut on his forehead, bruises on his chest, and other scratches to his hands, wrist, and forearms. And the prosecution claimed that he had tried to conceal these by covering them with makeup when he spoke to police. Gail Hawkins, Suzanne's friend, testified and told the court that Suzanne had previously said she was worried David had hacked her email account and was accessing her emails. The court heard that it was the prosecution's case that David had accessed her emails between the 24th of August 2009 and the 30th of April, 2010, and that he had also accessed her account on an internet dating website. The court heard testimony from Helen Liddell, a financial administrator at Infrastructure Management who worked with Suzanne and David, but was not aware they had been in a relationship. She accessed the emails following Suzanne's disappearance and told the court that she had found emails between David Gilroy and Suzanne. Helen told the court that she was very surprised by the contents of the emails and that it was clear they were having an affair, a relationship. The jury were shown CCTV footage of Suzanne and David 2 days before she disappeared. On the evening of the 2nd of May, David and Suzanne went shopping at a convenience store, despite David telling police that their relationship had ended in December 2009. The court heard that police narrowed the search area for Suzanne's body to 5 square miles based on David's phone records, as they discovered his phone was pinging off phone masts in the Glen Crow area on the 5th of May. Glen Crow is a glen in the heart of the Arachar Alps on the Cowal Peninsula, in Argyll and Butte, and is surrounded by large and rugged mountains characterized by huge boulders. There was also a sighting of a silver family car parked on a track in the Glen Crow area that same day. Despite the narrowing of the search area, the court heard that it was still a vast and complex task to find remains there, as there were mountains, steep terrain, and dense forests. It was the defense's case that there was no evidence against their client, and that the prosecution's case was purely circumstantial. Suzanne's body had not been found, and the prosecution could only speculate that she was dead and how she may have died. There were no witnesses, there was no confession, and there was no DNA or blood found. Everything the prosecution had was circumstantial. The defense's case was short and lasted less than a day, based on their argument that the prosecution had not proven its case. David did not testify himself, but the defense called some of his co-workers to give evidence. They testified that they had not noticed anything out of the ordinary at the office on the 4th of May. The jury deliberated for 2.5 days and were not unanimous in their decision. The court agreed to accept a majority verdict, and on that basis, David was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison and ordered to serve a minimum term of 18 years. To date, Suzanne's remains have not been found. Sadly, her father, Rob, died in 2019 without ever finding out exactly what had happened to his daughter. Her mother, Sylvia, and sister, Gail Fairgrieve, hoped that Suzanne will be found soon, as the family wished to say a proper goodbye. Gail said that for the past decade, the family had lived in a state of limbo, waiting for the news that Suzanne's body had been found, but had never been able to get closure. She said that they understood only one person could tell them where Suzanne was, but that he had refused to do so, and that Police Scotland were committed to bringing them some form of closure. She said their investigation could only conclude when Suzanne was found, and she pleaded with anyone who knew something but had not come forward to search their conscience and get in touch, not for the family's sake, but for Suzanne's, so that they could give her the burial and send-off she deserved. David has refused to reveal where Suzanne is buried, as he continues to maintain his innocence.